Good afternoon again, and welcome to the Public Safety and Government Operations Committee meeting. In attendance today, we have, of course, myself, the chair, representing the 4th District, Councilman Burnett, representing the 8th District, Councilman Glover, representing the 13th District, Councilwoman Porter, representing the 10th District, and Councilwoman Ramos, representing the 14th District. Representing the Office of the President, today, I don't see anybody representing, I see in the, can you say your name? Okay, you're welcome to sit up here if you'd like. Thank you. And representing the Mayor's Office, I've got Nina Themelis. This afternoon, we're actually going to be switching up the order of the hearings in order to accommodate our city administrator, who will be in a little bit later. So we're going to start off with Bill 21-0163, study and report of the evaluation of the emerging medical services system, and then we'll go into LO 21-0015, Baltimore City Fire Department Emergency Medical Services Statin Operations. So first with Bill 21-0163, the study and report evaluation of the emergency medical services system for the purpose of requiring the Baltimore City Fire Department to submit a report to the mayor and city council evaluating the department's current emergency medical services EMS delivery model and exploring the creation of an EMS bureau in the Baltimore City Fire Department and providing for a special effective date. This bill was introduced on October 4th, 2021, and it was sponsored by Councilmember Chris Burnett. I'll open the floor to Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues, Chief Ford, and to your team, thank you for joining us. So I'll keep my remarks short. This is a very similar attempt to evaluate the effectiveness of the Baltimore City Fire Department's response and operations. I'm not going to go through all the questions being asked in it, but it's essentially a study report of the EMS operations in Baltimore City and looking at other response models and asking for a review of some of the services that we provide. We do have one amendment that I forgot to send out to everyone today, but in short, I'll email it out. In the agency's report, they lay out concerns about the timeline of 150 days to complete the study report. We were going to, and we can still discuss it today, looking to extend it out to 250 days, adding 100 days onto what was already laid out in the bill. I had it drafted, forgot to send it. I will email it out now, but obviously this is not something we would vote on without getting law department and others' feedback, including the agency's feedback, on if that's a timeline that they could reach at 250 days. But my apologies for not getting it out on time to you all for review. That's all I got, Mr. Chair.
Awesome. Thank you, Councilman Burnett. The committee will now hear from agency representatives. I want to remind folks that all of the mics are live, so if you are talking to each other, please speak away from the microphone or else we will hear everything. So I'll start with the law department.
Mr. Chair, Nina Themelis with the Mayor's Office of Government Relations. The Law Department stands by its report and doesn't oppose or approves the bill for form and legal sufficiency.
Awesome. Thank you, Nina. Now I'll go to the Fire Department. Chief Ford.
Well, Chairman, committee, Niles Ford, the Fire Chief of the Baltimore City Fire Department. I want to point out a few concerns I do have. Certainly the amendment that you're bringing forward, we ultimately are going to have to forward this off to another outside agency in order to facilitate the outcome of this, this bill. I also believe, because we don't have the staffing, as the Facets report stated in the report they did, that they began in 2021 or 2020, it said that we're woefully understaffed in administration. In particular, they pointed out the fact that us having around 1,800 members, just counting HR alone, we only have 6 members in the staffing to handle human, sorry about that. We have 1,800 members, and just pointing out HR alone, we only have 6 full-time people who do that. So to that extent, throughout our organization on the administrative side, to say we are lean is a significant overstatement. To that end, as far as taking on the burden of facilitating studies throughout these bills, it's going to be impossible. We certainly wouldn't be able to do it effectively. Consequently, the best thing for us to do is go outside. The flip side of that, my concern is the fact that this may be premature to circumstances. Now, what that means is we're in the process of going through the mayoral's budget right now. There's certain initiatives we're going through in this budget that may make people rethink this. So I'd like for us to encourage, if nothing else, to hold this for future consideration. At least wait until some of the initiatives that we plan on putting in place or in place. And then it may make you, to be frank with you, I have to believe it would make you rethink a lot of this. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief Ford.
I'm here to also answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief Ford. I understand City Administrator will be here a little bit later, and what we'll do is, if we need to pause halfway through our next hearing to get the City Administrator's insight, we'll do that. Next we'll go on to the Department of Finance.
Good afternoon, Mara James for the Department of Finance. We stand by our report. We do not oppose this legislation, as the Chief mentioned. We believe that some of this can be covered by what was previously done in the facets report, but there's also possible outsourcing for some of the additional aspects of the study that will have an additional cost. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. I'll open the floor to questions, and I'll open first to the sponsor of the bill, Councilman Burnett, and forgive the random sounds as they fix our beautiful City Hall.
Yeah, I'll try to get it in before the next round of hammering. The only question I had for you, Chief, is you noted that there's going to be, it sounds like, some structural changes to the department. What timeline could we expect additional information to come before the committee for consideration?
It would be closer to the mayor's budget, in the process of facilitating that budget. That's part of it. But I also want to echo what Finance said. It's factual that some of the components that are discussed in this are overshadowed in the current facets report as well.
Thank you. That's all I have.
I've got a question I'll go quickly, and then I'll get to other members on the committee. Can you guys hear me well?
You might want to pull it up a little bit closer if you can.
Okay. This is almost worse than
The ambiance isn't helping you much.
Can we mute the construction?
Yeah, we can't mute them, unfortunately. Yeah. Do you guys know of any other major city fire departments that have a separate EMS bureau established in their organization?
I need to probably ask what people perceive as being the definition of a separate bureau. Okay. EMS is already its own division in our organization, okay, but it's a part of the fire department. Got so I need to get clarity what that means.
Okay. Do you see any other different structures from organizations?
I'm sorry, could you repeat? We'll probably be doing a lot of that.
Have you seen any other structures, and how has, if you have seen any other structures for major fire departments, how has that factored in your consideration for that? So
there are several different ways to facilitate EMS in the country. Some organizations, EMS, like case in point, New Orleans, EMS it's separate, self-sustained to itself. Fire is separate, self-sustained to itself. There are some organizations that there is no separation, and there's no such thing as a division. Everybody does EMS and everybody does fire. And then there's certain organizations that are like us. What we do is probably more common to what happens in the Northeast. So it's not based on, it's not necessarily based on a standard. It's more based on the needs of the community and what it looks like the best practices for that community. And so that's probably the best answer I can give you on that.
Okay. And I'm curious, what percentage of the department's calls go to EMS today?
Okay, I need to add clarity to that. The entire organization is an EMS organization, right?
Yeah.
That's
EMS units.
everybody's trained in EMS.
Got it.
But 80% of our call volume is EMS related, right? And the other 20% is mostly suppression, but there are some other issues that are involved in that as well. But fire units run on almost all EMS calls. Not all of them, but almost all of them. Yeah.
And as far as the expertise to sort of manage EMS, we kind of, you said we kind of handle that together. Mm-hmm. Is that expertise interchangeable? Would you have someone who is more adept at EMS manage the fire side of things, and likewise, does that specialty benefit?
Yeah. I have people who specialize in EMS, that's all they do. Everyone in suppression is EMT trained, but not everybody in EMS is prepared to work on the suppression side. Even though we send them all through Firefighter 1, they're not prepared to work and they're not hired to do that. So the entire organization is an EMS organization, okay? But as far as skill set, as far as knowledge and extensive abilities in EMS, it's going to be found in the people that run EMS all day, every day, and that's a fact. That's part of the reason why I have that young man sitting right there.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll open the floor to questions. I see Councilman Porter.
You can go ahead first. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues. Great to be here in person, even though we have the background noise.
Yes.
I have my first question is for the sponsor. There's part of the bill that talks about the reimbursement. You want a 5-year budget on reimbursement. In addition to the federal level, there's also state requirements. So we should probably just add that in there, that they should be also reporting on based on what the state is reimbursing as well.
Yeah.
Is that?
Did you speak to that? I didn't.
Well, and Chief, I'll let you elaborate more on that if you don't mind. Grab the mic, but this is another.
There's a bill in Annapolis actually pending about this right now. Yeah.
Yep. And there's been a bill passed about it as well, but this is another component that I think would be wise for us to probably hold on and see how things play out in the next several months, because even that may give you a perspective on what this bill should look like. Chief Matz.
Is this on?
Yep.
Good afternoon. Just for the record, my name is James Matz. I'm the Deputy Chief of EMS. Our breakdown, 80 to 85% of our income comes from Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare is our federal portion. Medicaid is the state. It's actually broke down roughly 42, 43, it's something like that. You're correct. Our largest share does come from Medicare currently. Medicaid, back April 2021, they passed its acronym is ESPP. Mm-hmm. It's called the Supplemental Payment Program. I think I spoke to you briefly about it. It's where we're able to recoup the federal portion of the money that we leave on the table. We signed and applied to be part of that program. We just submitted our paperwork, and we're due payment late this fiscal year. Right about June-ish, we're supposed to be reimbursed for the federal share. It's a significant amount of money. Currently, we're paid roughly $100 per response and $10 a mile.
Yes.
They calculated an AMBO response is roughly $3,000 a response. When you add all the infrastructure, fuel, so what they do is we basically get reimbursed on 50% of that, the federal share, one time a year. Yeah. So it's a great program. It gives you a lot of income to be able to, invest in EMS in the department. So.
Yeah. So
We would just have to, but there's the state, the Medicaid dynamic as well with the state, and so we can figure out language to add in here if that's all right with you. Okay.
Right.
And then the second question was, we heard in the State of the State yesterday that the mayor is allocating more money for 2 more EMS units.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more detail about what that's going to look like, how it's going to play out, what the cost is, et cetera?
Yes, it's going to be 2 more 24-hour ambulance units.
And how many people is that?
2 people are assigned on it. We have basically 4 shifts. So those individuals, those units are going to run 24 hours nonstop. They're not going to be peak units or anything like that. And hopefully they will alleviate some of the strain on the system. But some of the other important things that the mayor pointed out that he is investing in and he's pushing forward into his next budget is really focusing on community paramedicine and things like that, and trying to figure out public health issues in the EMS, using EMS as part of that component. And that's part of what we've drawn out. As Chief Matt said, some of this information we highlighted when we had an opportunity to speak to you all. And but we're very excited about where it's going. We are, and one of the things Facet's pointed out is that we are a high performing public safety organization. And they said with the resources we do have, the limited resources we do have, we do an extraordinary job. So what we're hoping to do and what we're planning on to do is alleviate some of the stress off the system and also to proactively try to figure out a way to divert some of those calls.
And just as a follow-up, so that includes the people. Does it also include the actual, equipment and
Oh, yes.
apparatus and everything?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
it's the whole
Yes, ma'am.
thing.
Yes, ma'am.
That is one of the issues, is that some of our apparatus are just, old.
Well, yes and no. I'd beg to differ. I know some of the things that have been sent out on social media. It's not accurate. In fact, in about 9 months, we're probably going to have the youngest fleet that the fire department has ever had in the history of Baltimore City Fire Department. We actually sent somebody over at the History Museum to look back to 1932. That's where the record. That's as far as back as they can go. We expect in about 8 months to really make a significant difference. Our challenge is we're dealing with the same thing everybody else in the country is dealing with. If there's a problem getting supplies and getting equipment, getting parts, we're having that problem. And if the regular population has a cold in that, we have the flu. We have units that we cannot get parts for that are sitting up and waiting for us to do that. We can't get them repaired yet. So that's part of our dynamic. But we've introduced and brought in a whole lot of new apparatus, and we have a whole lot more coming. I mean, over the next year. And then we have some things being held up, like some of our ambulances are being held up because it's hard to get chassis for them. Initially, the delivery date was this year. It winds up now, the delivery date's been moved back to next year because of supply chain issues.
I have some other questions around that specific issue, but I'm happy to yield for
Yes,
the next
ma'am.
round. That's okay?
Let's go around and we'll come back.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, Chief Ford. I had a
Councilwoman, before you begin, I just want to acknowledge Councilman Costello's joined the meeting. Thank you, Councilman. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, thank you, sir. So I did have a question related to, so I read, kind of read some of the specifics of the FASTS report and, talking with some of the wonderful firefighters from Engine 55. As far as like operations, one of the things that they shared was that when there is an emergency, we have multiple EMS units, multiple trucks going to a particular incident.
Yes.
Now, in my mind, some of these incidents may not require multiple trucks going to, multiple EMS vehicles going to this particular incident. Can you share how you all are reimagining operations as it relates to, handling these types of emergencies? And I totally understand with regard to there has to be some preventative maintenance had because you don't know, you're going into the situation blind. But if there's an opportunity for us to really think through or really kind of look at operations as far as a logic model to say, hey, this is the criteria that meets 4 engine trucks going. This is the criteria that, so can you speak to that, sir?
Yes, ma'am. We actually do that often.
Okay.
We evaluate and reevaluate. In fact, I would argue about, I guess it was probably just over 2 years ago.
Okay.
I actually changed how we sent the first set of units out to fire that wasn't confirmed yet. And I wound up having to change it back after we did it because we ran into some issues. So we reevaluate this often. Right now, I need to be forthright about this, there's going to be some modifications made to some of it because I'm based upon some of the recommendations that are being given to us specifically from the committee we put together dealing with January 24th where we lost our members. In certain areas, I'm probably going to add more resources. So what we do normally is not only do we look and see what other departments do, like departments that deal with the same type of instances we do, but we have a higher call volume, not just on EMS, but also on fire.
Yes.
Than most Northeastern organizations, which would be comparable organizations to us. So we have to be very careful about limiting resources because one of the things that would be very important, one of the worst things that we could have put an incident commander in place to do is not send enough resources and him or her have to call for more resources. They have to call for more resources. So to that extent, we try to get as close to right as possible. So it's an ongoing process. Even the boundaries of where these units respond to, we reevaluate that through the CAD often.
No, and that's a good point that I wanted to bring up. And, and across the city, we are seeing an uptick in fire, just fires across the city, vacant buildings, fire safety alone. And so that was going to be my next suggestion and recommendation is that because we are seeing these increase across the city, just making sure that operations match the resources.
Yes, ma'am.
Because, I'm orange flag concerned about some of the uptick in fire that we are seeing across the city,
Yes, ma'am.
particularly within our vacant homes. Our homeless populations, our homeless encampments are seeing an uptick in fires that we don't necessarily have an answer for yet or a solution or even any updates related to them. And so just making sure that we are addressing the issue in the proper way, looking at the root causes of a lot of these issues. My second question actually has to deal with the public health service model that you all had mentioned before. Have there been any updates with regard to I know it was mentioned a community health worker model that you all were implementing along with, along within your operations? Has there been any updates on that?
Please.
Yeah, there's a lot of different models, Councilwoman, that we're looking at actively. There's the pairing of a community paramedic with a community health worker. That's more of your social worky type outreach, transportation, things like that. I actually was in a recent conversation with Deputy Health Commissioner. We're looking at some opiate models.
Perfect. And that's
where we're
the
going to
one I'm
tie
bringing
up.
up,
They're applying for another SAMHSA 4-year grant.
Perfect.
And they had talked about tying a peer recovery, somebody do buprenorphine kind of stuff. The idea is to be able to do a complete wraparound. That's just one aspect. If somebody calls and they need, some opioid support, we can call for that person. We have the option of doing a community health worker. The other option is to send out a community paramedic and an officer and just steer the right calls to the right locations. If you go to a call and somebody's not really appropriate for the ED, we're working on a telemedicine thing right now, working with an iPad and a platform where I can call back to somebody like Dr. Lawner, or I can call, Total Healthcare and say, hey, look, I have this patient. I don't want to say strong arm, but kind of steer people to the right direction. They could still absolutely refuse, but we're trying to get more movement. A few thousand here, a few thousand there is going to have a better impact on us. I like the opiate outreach, too, to be able to do some stuff with that.
Yeah, and the reason why I bring that up is because I remember a data point that I believe specifically you had mentioned the last hearing about the number of calls related to opioid and prescription. And so really assessing that triage to peer recovery support specialists, to community health workers and different things of that nature, so that we're assuming those that need to be critical as far as, fighting fires and different things like that, they have the bandwidth and operations to do that as well. So I'm really happy that you all are applying for additional funding support to that.
Stabilization Center as well. That was a problem. Stabilization Center wasn't participating with our ET3/ that supplemental payment. Medicaid is going to start to reimburse for that as well, which gives a sustainability option for the Stabilization Center, for another option in there. So there's a lot of wheels in motion. It seems like everything's coming together at one time, hopefully for the best.
Okay, perfect. Do you have a timeline on when that would be implemented or have some benchmark?
I mean, I would love to come back in 12 months and say we're up and kicking.
Yes.
So we're heading in that direction as best we can. We
Okay.
can get the people in place. as busy as we are, we also don't want to deplete where we're
Sure.
short too. So it's kind of a balance until we
Okay.
get there.
All right, cool, thank you.
Councilman.
Hello, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today.
Yes, sir.
My question is, what would be the immediate impact of the fire department if MS Bureau was to be implemented?
Well, I can't, I'll be frank with you, I don't know what that actually means because we already have EMS as a division, so I don't know what that impact would actually mean.
It's like, I'm talking about like the structure of the department, like does it create another level of bureaucracy like within the department? Like,
Well, it would certainly create another structure within the organization. I'm also kind of making assumptions on what the intent of the bill was, but we already have a division that is distinctly EMS, and we have amazing professionals in that area. One of the things that we are looking at doing, just as you spoke about, Councilwoman, is figuring out a way to build this out. The advantage we have right now that we have not had in the past, there's been a great deal of legislation that has given us an opportunity to move past being a one-play football team. All we could absolutely do is take people to the ER. That's it. Now we have a whole bunch of options. We have plethora of options, and we're going to try to use all of them to the hip to try to divert people from that. What that winds up doing, Councilman, it winds up making our system more robust and possibly leaving people more space to run calls and for us to improve our response time, and also just as importantly, if not more in certain circumstances to me, our EMS members run almost nonstop. They need some downtime because there's a whole lot of wear and tear mentally that you deal with running the type of calls that we run. And you need some diffusing time. So my hope and my intent on where we're going, and I think you'll see it pretty soon, is that we're going to build out our EMS in respects to the history of the Baltimore City Fire Department, it's going to almost be revolutionary.
all right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Councilman Burnett.
Yeah, I mean, so to add on that, for example, their Los Angeles 6 years ago established an EMS bureau within their department because of the growing need and for there to be a standalone structure. And so that the intent of that question is essentially heighten. There's one thing to have a division within the department; it's another thing to stand it up as its own sort of.
So the intent of a bureau is actually create another department.
Not necessarily. It's about heightening. The question would be more around heightening the level of importance of EMS within the structure of the Baltimore City Fire Department.
Okay. I don't see how that changes where we are right now. In respects to, quite frankly, in respects to where we're going anyway. It sounds like we're maintaining what we have, but maybe building it out, and that's the intentions that I have anyway. And that's where we're going right now.
Well, I mean, it's hard for me. You're
I know.
telling us where we're going, but you haven't really given us any detail, respectfully, of what that actually looks like. So this bill was put in 2021, and again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful in any way, but this is why the question is there. It sounds like there's things that will be announced in the future. This body has no way to really know.
But also there were certain things we discussed in broad terms when we did the presentation, and they point toward where we're going, specifically where we're going.
Okay. Well, in your agency report, you note that some of the assessments that are requested are programs you're currently studying or in the process of seeking approval. Can you give us more detail on what you're currently studying?
I'm sorry, Councilman, could you repeat that?
So in the bill report, it stated that some of the assessments that are requested are programs that you're currently studying and are in the process of seeking approval. Can you talk to us about which programs you're currently studying and what the approval process looks like?
Some of the things that you spoke about was evaluating, case in point, additional funding, and well, you're looking at funding dealing with Medicaid and Medicare, correct? I'll use that as an example. We already have legislation that has passed through the state that's going to give us a revenue chain that's going to significantly change. We don't know exactly how much. We have a general idea, and we're not completely sure. That's one component that once that gets assessed, once it finishes, that's gonna make us evaluate where we are. Also, there are several things that we're moving forward with population health, and that's the word I was trying to think of that I lost earlier. Population health, that is going to put us in the position where we won't be taking people to the ERs. We won't, unless it's necessary, unless it's needed for them to go to ER. We'll be going to alternate destinations. We're also looking at using alternate modes of transportation, as far as looking at possible Lyft and Ubers. And if you recall, one of the things I discussed specifically was some things that our colleagues are doing just southwest of us, DC. And we are basically, there's certain plans that they've sent to us. They also told us what they would have changed in the process. And they also showed us if they weren't basically attached to a federal organization, what they would do if they were just a local jurisdiction. So it's given us an opportunity to build together a playbook, and I think we're going to be able to go the right way with it. And it's going to be a significant change from where we are, just like I said.
So I guess the follow-up would be, what's the approval process and timeline that we could expect the evaluations to occur?
I think that a great deal of that you'll see as we have the opportunity to move forward with how the mayor's budget solidifies.
Okay. So that's the mayor's budget's due June 30th, or it needs to be passed by June 30th. Would it be, so the mayor's budget presumably will be passed at the end of June?
Yes.
So is that the timeline that we're looking at for?
I think.
Are you saying that you're looking for funding within the budget to be able to accomplish this?
I think once you have an opportunity to see what's in the mayor's budget, if it works out generally the way we're planning on it working out, I think we can explain a whole lot more to you. And I think that's the only reason why I said this may be a little. I'm sorry. That's why I said this may be a little premature in respects, because a great deal of these issues will generally be, from my perspective, will not be relevant. And I'm respectfully, I understand the necessity of inquisitor nature in this one, but I think I'm almost respectfully asking you as your leader of the fire department to give me an opportunity to make it through a few months. And then at that point, I think you'll be able to see where we're going in specificity, in more specificity, let me put it like that. And at that point, like I said, a great deal of what you're asking for, you may change it, but a great deal of it, from my perspective, would absolutely be irrelevant.
I mean, it would be helpful, and we can talk offline, if your agency report didn't indicate any specifics around things that should be revised or removed or already being considered. So I think that may be helpful information for us in this body and our ability to deliberate or work up amendments. Having more information would be useful.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think I do understand where you're coming from, and maybe these things will be addressed. I think it's just without having anything to speak for, really hard to.
Okay, I'll respectfully, what I will do is I will go back to some of the presentations we did, and I'll try to highlight those, because specifically some of those things were covered in those presentations, and
okay.
I'll highlight them.
I think that might be helpful.
Okay.
I just got one question. How many assistant chief positions does the department currently have?
4.
And what bureaus are those individuals responsible for?
I have safety member services, and safety member services is over the people safety, our member safety, and all the HR, finance, related, and safety and training stuff. I have a logistics chief, logistics and fire prevention position, assistant chief, who's over logistics, which means all the equipment, all the buildings. So the fire marshal's office, communications, both 911 and dispatch. I have an operations chief who's in charge of all the red trucks that you see ride around and running calls. And I have an executive assistant chief who actually is a space between me and the assistant chiefs. And he basically carries out all the projects that I dealing with them, and also meeting with the council and dealing with state legislators.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think Councilman Costello has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Where's Chief Wallace?
Chief Wallace is an OEM. He's a deputy chief.
No, I know who he is. I said, where is he?
He's not. I didn't include him in this because the EMS.
Just tell him I said he's the man.
Okay, he is. He's fantastic.
Mr. Chair, and to our colleague from the 8th District's question, we have upcoming budget briefings, and I think we're queued up for either the 25th or 26th of April. If we could, Mr. Chair, if you want to ask Mayor's Office of Government Relations or BBMR to be prepared to focus on the meat of Councilman Burnett's question, that might be a good forum to help delve into that a little further.
I would definitely agree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. I know Councilwoman Ramos had an additional question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions. Chief Ward, I wanted to go back to the discussion we were having about the equipment.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is actually an example on the suppression side, but I went and visited I have 2 firehouses in my district, and I visited Engine 21 and Truck 25 in Hamden. And the day that I got there, Truck 21 broke down that day.
Yes.
After having come back to the firehouse that day.
Yes.
And broke down, it came back to the firehouse because it had been, had to be worked on, and then it broke down again that day. Now they have it back, and that's wonderful, and I appreciate your effort to make sure that got done right away. But it seems like that's not uncommon. So
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about, I understand there's parts and all of that, but wasn't there a time when there would be someone who would actually go to the firehouses to fix this, and rather than having to ship this? So tell us a little bit more about what's going to happen there with the...
Only for very minor repairs. That would be the only time you could actually fix it on place. We basically send our units to DGS. DGS oversees our, the city shop. So we send our units to that. But for minor things, we also send our units to Pulaski Highway, and that's for minor things. The challenge that we have right now is we do not have any adequate reserve units. What I mean, when I say any, I mean none. One of the challenges the Baltimore City Fire Department has, and I would argue probably PD has the same issue and other departments that have apparatuses, is because we're so busy and we work our units so hard that by the time we're ready to put them in reserve, actually they're not adequate reserve. They're not even adequate reserves. They need to be kind of put out completely, and we can't keep them serviced up. That has been our challenge, is that we can't, once we get to the point where they're ready to go into reserves, the expense to keep them up or bring them back up to where they need to be at is almost the same expense to almost buy a new unit, or half of that. So do you want to invest in that? So that has been our challenge, but what we see coming very soon is the fact that, like I said, I think we have around 7 Seagraves engines coming in, 5 Pierce engines coming in. So we have a lot coming, and I mean this year. And so we have a lot coming. We just have to get to that point. And we knew, I'm going to be frank with you, that a year ago that we would be here and dealing with some of the issues that we're dealing with and trying to make it to the other side. And we also knew that the supply chain issue was going to be an issue even for that. But we're anticipating, if everything works out, to be on the other side. I mean, when I say we have a lot of apparatuses, new apparatuses coming in, we do. But we've got to make it there. And we are going to have that challenge until then. We had a starter basically go out on one of the units while I was in the bay over the last week. Had another issue where a part came out. We also had another issue where somebody wrecked a brand new truck. And so all of those issues we're trying to work our way through.
And I had a similar question than the sponsor did in terms of, the bill report didn't have any recommendations for changes to the bill that you'd like to make sure that we report, that you can report on all of these great changes that are happening. So would you be able to work with us on that? Because it sounds like you had said that the things that we're asking for, or the sponsor's asking for in this report, may not be relevant later. So we'd probably want to obviously work with you to amend this so that we have, and then we also have, obviously more questions that we'll probably put in here as a result of this conversation.
Madam Councilwoman, I'd be more than happy. In fact, to be frank with you, when you're writing the bills, if you contact us, I'd put somebody with you, put an EMS specialist, put a suppression specialist, and they can tell you what challenges we have and what we see. And then you can formate, at least you can make an informed drawings of where you think we should go, and we could tell you what our challenges are sometimes.
Ask a question following up off of Councilwoman Ramos's question with running fire trucks to EMS calls.
Yes.
What impact does that have on the wear and tear on our fire trucks? Are we seeing that our fire trucks are going down more often, or don't have quite the life cycle that we would expect?
It's several components that are involved with that, Mr. Chair. Most other agencies the firefighters run EMS calls because there are more of us out. We're centrally located in the communities. What ends up happening is ambulances end up going to the hospitals, being stuck at the hospitals, or come out from the hospitals, and then they're coming from wherever geographic location that is. Everybody's EMS trained. So you send someone who is EMS trained to provide help right then. Everybody does that. The challenge we have is that we have a whole lot of calls. We are an extraordinarily busy unit. And on the backside of that, because we live in a snowy climate, an older city, we have street issues, right? So as we have potholes and all the things that normally happen in cold climates, regardless, we're putting a beating on the trucks. No differently than think about driving your car, having to drive lights and sirens in a car.
I'm all too familiar.
So that's part of the dynamic we deal with. But but part of what Chief Matz was talking about is our goal is to substantially change that, and in respects where we send the right resources to the person and send them or not send them someplace, right? And that would eliminate a whole lot of that on the engine side, we believe, including adding more ambulances, as the mayor's putting in it, putting nurse practitioners in order to triage calls. There's going to be a significant dynamic shift, I believe, in the fire department. But it has to be coupled with another thing. Now, we've done education as far as educating people about 211, 311, and 911. We've gone into communities. We put things on websites. We put things out. I've been on the radio several times talking about it. During the beginning of COVID, I talked about it over and over again. And we had some side effects to that too, but I talked about it over and over again. We're going to have to turn the culture that if something happens to you, call 911. But that's going to take time, because where we've gotten to over a period of time, and it's been 30 or 40 years we've been doing this. And that's part of the dynamic we've got to work on as well, Council Chair, Mr. Chairman, sorry.
Yeah, and I think, I want to get to Councilwoman, but it kind of flows with that question. I know we're getting 2 additional units. I'm sure we're using data to determine where that need will be. Do we know yet where those 2 additional units will be housed? What stations?
The irony, and Chief Matt's out, you can echo off me or you could say something different. The irony about the city of Baltimore, our call volume is certainly all over the city, but there is an area within the heart of the city that a great deal of our resources go into and pretty much get stuck there because of the call volume. And that's part of the reason why we actually are in the process of opening a station, EMS station dedicated to EMS close to the downtown area. That the only thing that runs out of there is EMS units.
Thank you. Councilwoman?
So I want to transition a little bit to talk through, from a human capital perspective, one of the things that, similar to Councilwoman Ramos, I actually visited a few of my fire stations in my district, and the conditions
Yes, ma'am.
that these brave men and women are working under, sleeping in, are absolutely deplorable.
Yes.
I was very taken aback as a public health scientist, as a citizen of Baltimore, and just a person that has worked in service industry for the majority of my life. And I wanted to know, when we're thinking through this new creation of an EMS bureau, can you speak to me about your human capital component, how you are going to manage, not only operations, but also ensuring that our firefighters and EMS personnel are existing and working in the best conditions possible?
Yep, that's two distinctly different questions too. So let me start with the first one, the human capital question. The human capital question, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. You're referring to the fact of us finding and adding additional talent. There's going to be some general challenges with that, but we're prepared for it. We've already started establishing the recruitment process. We literally already have applications in, and Chief Surveiller, do you know what the number is of EMTs and paramedic applications we have out there now? It's Chief Surveiller over Safety Member Services.
Yeah, EMT, the numbers were high for EMT, a couple hundred, and they were lower for paramedics. I don't have the exact number, but the EMT seems to be who we're drawing more rather than the paramedics.
And the two additional ambulances are going to be EMT ambulances, but the challenge that we have is we are short on paramedics significantly. Everybody is. Every department is. We're all competing with each other. Because of COVID, people weren't going to school or they couldn't get clinicals, and I think we discussed that when we talked to you all. Yep. They couldn't get their clinicals done, so they couldn't get out to challenge National Register. So there's very few people coming out. Everybody's running after those people, and we're part of that group. But we do have 200 applications right now for EMTs. Even though I'm saying that right now, you have to be qualified. You already have to be EMT certified in order to get this job. So the challenge we're going to have, many of those people are not going to have those certifications. They're not going to be qualified. So we had to figure out, after DHR filters those numbers, who actually is a valid, qualified candidate.
No, thank you for that. Yeah, the second.
Yeah.
We're actually graduating a class of EMTs Friday.
Nice.
11.
EMTs and paramedics, am I right?
No, just EMTs. EMTs on Friday. It's 11 of them. And we just started a recruit class March 31st of 7 EMTs. They should be out ready for the street sometime in September. And we have a class of approximately 40 EMT firefighters slated to start April 13th. And their estimated graduation where they'll be ready for the field would be in January. Yeah. So that's 18 people by September that we should have out ready to go in the EMS area.
Yeah. So the other side of that is our buildings. Mm-hmm. The fastest report probably dedicated 200 pages to that. And a lot of that information, Chief Case supplied to him. A lot of that information we had already been preparing, we had already been following up and documenting as well. We are, of course, as the mayor announced, we're rebuilding Engine 14. There are other stations we are looking at as far as doing a complete renovation, refurb to the station, several of them, and possibly building other stations. So this is, and we already had a listener perspective. Facets certainly, Facets basically supported our list. They confirmed what we were looking at. So we're working through that process as we speak.
Okay, and the only reason why I bring that up is, from a human, just kind of connecting the human capital component to the working conditions,
Yeah.
is ensuring that we have our individuals, they are in the best fruitful environment to
Right.
provide the best service to Baltimore City.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so if they are sleeping in deplorable conditions, if they are, just existing, paint chipping, it was absolutely horrendous.
Yes, ma'am.
We need to make sure that that is in place. And so, I know you have the full support of my colleagues and I to provide whatever we need to kind of do that, because if not, then we're not going to be providing the best service to Baltimore. And given the uptick in fires that we've seen across the district, well, not my district, but the city in general, we want to make sure that we have those individuals at their best, and giving
Yes.
them their best.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge city administrators joined the meeting. I'm going to turn over to Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. The amendment on the table was to move the study from 150 days to 250. My ask is, can you explain the justifications of, why is it taking a year?
One of the things, Councilman, we don't have the bandwidth from an administrative standpoint to carry this out, and quite frankly, we don't have the certain skill set to do some of the things that's requested. We'd still have, so we're going outside for an outside agency. But as of today, that same agency who knows our organization pretty significantly and now knows our organization, they are probably one of the preeminent organizations that does studies of public safety agencies like fire departments and EMS organizations, OEM also. They're going to come in with the knowledge. So by giving us that space, it gives them time to turn out the other three previous bills and the studies that are associated with the other three previous bills, and subsequently we will tag on this this next bill, and that's based upon also, like I said, I think that after you all see some of the directions that we're going in, some of that may not be as necessary in your minds. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief Ford. We're going to actually turn over to City Administrator Shorter, give him an opportunity. I know you are short on time, and so appreciate you for making time today.
Thank you, Chairman and council members. Happy to be here, and certainly happy to just affirm the report sent from my office in support of the fire chief. And I'm, of course, happy to answer any questions. I'm going to stick around for a bit to answer any questions that may come.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I've got one, and I think this may be one better slated for Fire Chief. Very recently, the police department renegotiated its starting salary for its officers, realizing that our starting salary wasn't so competitive regionally, and or that it wasn't competitive enough regionally.
Yes.
Do you, what do EMTs make starting out?
Do you know the updated numbers? I'll have to, could you send an email out and see if we can get it? We'll try to get it before we're done. I don't know because we just finished contractual negotiations, and there has been a change in their salary.
Got it.
I just don't know how significant.
Okay, that would be helpful.
And that's the other component. It's greatly driven by certainly studies that DHR does with like organizations, but the other component is it's based on negotiations and what the unions are asking for in their process.
Got it. And I guess along those lines, understanding if it's competitive regionally is also important. So if you guys have a sense for what other folks are also paying their starting EMT salaries.
Yeah.
And then I understand you need certain certifications in order to be eligible for the job. Is that a barrier for some folks?
Yes.
Does it stop some folks?
Yeah, and that's part of the conversation we're having of whether or not we're going to change having EMT requirements on the front end or train them. We've done that before. been successful at times, unsuccessful at others. So we've got to study within our department, and we are already heading that way.
Thank you. Councilman Burnett?
Thank you. This question's for CA Shorter, CAO Shorter. So one of the things that's come up repeatedly in these sort of quests to get more information from the fire department has been capacity challenges, which I believe are true. Are you aware of these gaps, and what is your office doing either through the budgetary process to try and expand capacity, to do the research and analysis, which I would hope is sort of a central piece of what we're asking all of these agencies to do, is to use data, use research, use best practices from across the country, and to continue to evaluate and report out to this body. Are you looking at expanding capacity for the fire department or other agencies?
Two responses. Thank you for the question, Councilman. Two responses. About 2.5 weeks ago, we came and talked through the city's STAT process, and we talked certainly about, beyond STAT, about capacity around data reporting and the systems we use to track information. We will certainly be and plan to continue to bring that talent to bear to support the fire department. I'm not prepared today to talk about or get ahead of the mayor in terms of the preliminary budget and the budget process. I will say that, and I believe that the fire chief spoke to this before I walked in, there is a plan to expand capacity and certainly leverage some of the funding, some of the additional funding that is coming to the fire department through Medicaid to expand their capacity. I don't want to get too far ahead in terms of the budget process. I think we have a lot to talk about when that time comes. I hope that answers your question.
To a degree. I mean, I wouldn't, obviously this committee, we focused, and myself has focused a lot on fire reporting requests, but I would note that there are other agencies in which, over my time in this body, that we've asked for best practices or research through whether it be through the budget process or the oversight process, and other agencies have also expressed an inability to be able to.
Are we talking about fire or other agencies?
Other agencies. I'm just speaking broadly, that there seems to be a lack of capacity broadly within agencies to be able to handle study report requests or data requests in a timely manner. I do understand what the chief is saying, that it may take us time to be able to compile this information. This body, if we're every time asking something, we need a year or more to be able to respond, it doesn't allow us, or I would imagine the administration, to be able to be flexible or to use real-time data to make decisions if there are capacity challenges. Not really much of a question, it's more of a statement, but yeah.
Councilwoman Ramos?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question, I guess, is for the both of you. Chief, you mentioned that there is a task force that you formed that's doing a report about what happened on January 24th.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us a timeline and what the goal is there?
Okay, there's actually two organizations doing it. NIOSH.
It's a national study. Yeah.
And then we have a local organization. I've already received some preliminary recommendations from them, but now they have to literally write a report on everything they've seen and everything, all the interviews associated with it. From that extent, I don't have a timeline on that at all, and I have a perspective because of I'm expecting next 3 or 4 months to get something in writing, but I can't confirm that completely. But I do have certain policies that will be coming out, and certain, actually we've already made some significant changes right off. When they made recommendations to us for low-hanging fruit, we made the changes right off. But there are other things specifically dealing with how they decide to take action on a vacant structure that we are putting in place. In fact, I think I got the final draft today, and I don't think I have to make any more changes to it, so I expect that to come out very soon. That's the most important thing, is that we move toward certain things that adjust how we work. to try to ensure that doesn't happen again.
Well, and I would say that there's multiple factors here.
It is.
It's not just, how the fire department responds to the structure, but obviously, and city administrator knows that we actually have to get rid of the structures,
Right.
by rehab or demolition. So there is that particular emphasis that I know I am fully committed to addressing. So similar, however, is the issue of making sure that the firefighters that are on the scene have the information about the house, right? So we have Code Map, I can look it up and I can see, but you don't have time to go onto Code Map, especially if it's too slow these days. So what has been, and I guess maybe the city administrator can answer this, and I haven't followed up with the commissioner, Commissioner Kennedy, but how is that information exchange happening? Is it happening now? Are we still waiting for something? What are we doing here? Because
Sir, do you mind if I? Okay. One of the directives the mayor gave us right after the incident, if you remember, he came out and did a press conference. Commissioner Kennedy and my team have gotten together. In fact, Chief Stewart is working with them. We already had a list of vacant structures in our CAD that show up when people respond. But there was a difference between the numbers that we have and what Commissioner Kennedy had. One of the first things we did is work on trying to make sure those align. The other thing is that Chief Stewart and Commissioner Kennedy's staff is trying to, not only do we want it electronically on the CAD, meaning that when our members respond to a call and all the information shows up on the MDT in front of them in the apparatus. Also, the other thing that they're working on is being able to physically mark them in a way that would not seem unusual to anyone else, but firefighters would know what to look for. So that's one of the things that we're working through, and we're pretty far along on that.
Well, if I may, there's
Yes.
a couple of things here. One is, there's structures that are not lived in, but they're okay, and then there's some that are significantly compromised. And that's the information that I think you need, is which one, because there are people living in them, and
Yes.
we want to make sure that they're safe, which is what happened. And so, if you could talk to that.
And and I'm glad you pointed out I wasn't complete with my statement. What they're actually focusing on is not vacant structures. What they're focusing on is dangerous vacant structures,
Right, compromised.
unsafe vacant structures. Those are the ones that are going to be physically marked, that they're going to know exactly what that is. And at least it's our goal. The only challenge is that number is going to change, right? There's going to be variations to that number, but to the best of our ability as far as what we know, because we're also going to be evaluating as we do safety sweeps, and we're going to be able to mark it as we go out in the community to install smoke alarms. So we're trying to look at it as many folds as we can. From an analog standpoint, we want something marked on it, right? So if you jump in the apparatus and something happens to the MDT, we don't have to worry about that because something's going to be marked there. But furthermore, we're also, I have my battalion chief, Chief Chase, and her team are working, and my director of IT within my department are working on a process to install in the CAD some perspective of AVL, Advanced Vehicle Locator. So when the first unit shows up on the scene and announces I'm on the scene, that our goal is that the dispatcher has something that locates where they are within 200 feet, within so many feet. They'll be able to say within 200 feet of where you're standing on 802, that's a dangerous vacant facility, such and such. That's our goal. That's where we're going. So we're trying to digitally figure it out, and we're trying to cover as many bases as we can to make sure people are as safe as possible. Now, the far end of that is, even after that, we have to make sure our people know what to do when they get on the scene. And they're also comfortable enough to make tough decisions. Because if you show up on the scene and somebody says somebody's in the house,
You gotta go.
somebody's in the structure, they've got to be able to, based on their experience and what we're teaching them, to know whether or not they should even go in that structure, even after they've been told that. And that's a tough call to make.
Right. I appreciate that. I know that wasn't the subject of our hearing today, but I do
Yes, ma'am.
appreciate the opportunity to ask questions. Thank you.
I'll also add, in addition to sort of the readiness for our fire team, there was talk of stepped up cleaning, and particularly boarding of vacant homes in our announcement around the investments for housing. In addition to us making sure that we are paying much closer attention to supporting DPW in that effort and in that work, we are now adding this element to our clean stat. And so up to this point, we've focused really on trash, recycling, grounds maintenance, other aspects of the day-to-day operations in terms of cleaning the city. Since that announcement, housing, and particularly vacants, has been added to that stat. And so this afternoon, after I leave here, we're going to be doing that stat, and a part of that stat will include how DPW is treating vacants. That is to say, if we have, in the matter of 60 days, visited a single home 5-6 times to reboard, we have to come back with a different solution. And so that's the kind of work that we're doing now to make sure that we're focused in on how to use resources smarter, how to make sure we are supporting our workforce in a smarter way. We don't want to continue to send DPW teams back out 6-7 times to the same property, and how we make sure that the community is safe, because those are the properties that will likely end up dealing with some emergency, some fire emergency. So I know that veers a bit from the question you asked, but I wanted to make sure that I added that additional content.
And also the other piece is not every vacant property has a VBN, right? So
Yes.
that is something that I know I'll be doing outreach in my district to make sure that that happens, so that the data, because the data that we're using is based on VBN. And so, we just have to get more VBNs on. I know that doesn't look good on the statistics, but we got to know the data in order to, address the issue. So just added that. So I appreciate the opportunity to get that answered. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Chief Surveyor, can you answer the question that?
Yeah, the starting salaries you had asked about. So for EMT, they start at 34,000. Paramedics start at 46. Paramedics with a national registry certification start at 48. And EMT firefighters, which are the ones that go to the suppression units, start at 39. And I stand corrected on the class that graduates Friday. There are 4 paramedics in it. I should have never corrected the chief. He's always right.
No.
So that's my bad.
Thank God, because you have to do a whole lot of correcting with me. That's a fact.
Councilman Burnett, I understand.
Yeah, so I wanted to add on to Councilmember Ramos's last point. That was the point I wanted to make, was vacant building notices versus unoccupied properties.
Yes.
I would, and I'm not entirely sure how to approach it, but would just flag for the administrator that obviously how we define vacants are either open to casual entry or some very serious structural deficiency. But there are other properties that do not fit that profile, and I lived next to one of them for a decade where it was unoccupied. There were definitely problems that I knew about because my basement was flooded as a result, but it wasn't open to casual entry, had a roof. I cut the grass. I still cut the grass. I actually just paid the guy to do it because I still own the house. But that's something that the fire department may not. It's a house, just an example of one that you may not know about that may have some structural challenges that prevent a danger. And maybe we can figure out offline, I don't think we're going to figure out today, how to sort of encapsulate that piece, but I just wanted to lift up the point that she was raising, that not everything with the VBN is necessarily safe to enter.
Sure. No, it's a great point. I'll say we are actually a bit away from announcing a fellowship this summer. We'll be working with Carnegie Mellon. There's some predictive analytics that we absolutely could use to tell us when a house is no longer occupied but doesn't have any structural deficiencies. One is the use of water. If we find that no one's there, they're not using water, they're not using basic city services, there's some prediction there, and so that program should start sometime in June. and the hope is that they will actually be able to tell us when we can bring city resources to a home that is not at this point, the roof is not caving in, but we know that it is no longer occupied, and we should be bringing some level of additional support to that home. So your point is well taken, and I think we'll have in the coming months some additional information to put to you all about the work we're doing as a city.
Yeah, I look forward to that. I think that would be helpful for this committee and obviously the rest of the council as well.
Very good.
I have thoughts on that.
Yeah, it sounds really cool, and I know none of that is within the bounds of what we're here today to discuss, but I know it's something that's on everyone's minds given the recent deaths of a number of our firefighters. With that, I don't see any further questions from folks on the committee, and to that end, we'll move into public testimony. Do we have anybody testifying today? We do not, so that will conclude public testimony. We have already discussed our single amendment. It's just to extend to 250 days. We're not voting on this bill today, nor the amendment. And so we're actually going to put this in recess and move on to our next hearing. Thank you, City Administrator, for coming in. Appreciate you guys coming back on time. The next bill that we will hear is 21-0163. Nope, not that one. LO 21-0015, Baltimore City Fire Department, Emergency Medical Services Stat and Operations, for the purpose of requesting the fire chief to present information on the Public Safety and Government Operations to the Public Safety and Government Operations Committee evaluating EMS data and operations. This bill was introduced on October 4th, 2021 by myself, and I will hand it over to you.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman Conway, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council. Thank you for taking the time to see us today. For the record, my name is James.
Quickly, before you begin, I just wanted to let you know we're going to have 4 opportunities in between the slideshow.
Just give me the look.
Pause. And so 1 through 13, after that, we'll stop for questions. Then we'll do 14 through 20, and then stop for questions, and do 21 to 31, stop for questions. And we're actually just gonna, if we need to, we'll reference slides 32 to 45. I think a lot of that stuff, if folks have questions, they're more than welcome to ask those questions. Everyone has the slides. Does that sound good?
It sounds fun.
All right,
Sam, do me a favor and give me stink eye when to stop, okay?
Okay.
Just to go for the record.
All right.
So anyway, good afternoon, everyone. For the record, my name is James Matz. I'm the Deputy Chief of EMS. I'm also joined by my esteemed colleague today.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us here. Ben Launer, Medical Director of the Fire Department, Emergency and EMS Physician with the University of Maryland School of Medicine.
So I'm going to go ahead and just get started like we normally do with these, and I'm sorry these can be a little dry, but we still try to each quarter go through the top 10 box area assignments. And what we did actually in this presentation, I don't know if you saw, but we actually got a little more granular, a little more visual too, so it's nicer to look at.
Good.
Of course, our top 10 boxes are 51, 8, 33, 27, 29, 13, 45, 30, 14, and 6. And what we did is we showed the city as a whole and then brought it down to the individual box assignments with their neighborhoods to make it easier to look at. This is the city as a whole, showing all these different box areas, anywhere from East Baltimore, Northwest Baltimore, more downtown and Southwest Baltimore. And then what we did is we actually drove them down to the individual boxes. First being our 51 box. 51, box area 51-1 actually accounted for 245 incidents in the first quarter. Those neighborhoods include the Elwood Park Monument neighborhoods, Baltimore Highlands, Patterson Park, Orangeville, and the Orangeville Industrial Park area. And what you can notice is they actually kind of heat mapped them, so the more calls in the area, they made them a little redder, so it was easier to look at. The next area is box number 8-1, which actually accounted for 229 incidents. And those neighborhoods are Sandtown, Westchester, Midtown Edmonton, Harlem Park, and Bridgeview Green Lawn. The next area is 33-50, and that actually accounted for a total of 226 incidents in the quarter. And those neighborhoods are McElderry Park, Milton Montford, Care, Patterson Place, Madison East End, and Middle East. The highest number is McElderry Park, which roughly accounts for 118 incidents. The next box area is in northeast Baltimore. It's a 27-30 box, and that actually accounted for 207 incidents, and that was the Frankfurt neighborhood. The next item down is 29-20, which is northwest Baltimore. It accounted for 194 incidents overall, and those neighborhoods are Park Lane, Cold Spring, and Silburn. Next up is box area 13-4. It had 191 incidents, and those neighborhoods are Upton, which had the highest with 172, Madison Park, Bolton Hill, and Heritage Crossing. The next area up is going to be box area 45-40, which is again northwest Baltimore. Those neighborhoods are Levendale, Mount Washington, and Cold Spring. Next, we have West Baltimore, which is a box area 30-52. And those areas or those neighborhoods are Violetville, which accounted for 91 incidents, St. Agnes, and Wilhelm Park. The next box area is box area 14-50, which is southwest Baltimore. They had 182 incidents in the first quarter. That's Carrollton Ridge and New Southwest and Montclair. Next up is going to be box area 6-62, which is really central South Baltimore. Those neighborhoods are Mount Vernon and downtown.
All right, I think we're going to take a pause here and thank you guys for putting that on the map. It actually helps a ton to see it over our streets and understand corners and otherwise where we're seeing hot spots. I'll open the floor to questions. To Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very embarrassed because I'm not familiar with the box numbers for each portion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Mr. Councilman, there's so many boxes you would have a terrible time. 14 is the engine. When you see the first number, that's going to be the associated company. So like 14, which is Southwest Baltimore, all the 14 dashes are all 14 engine. 45 would be all the Northwest Baltimore area and so forth.
Do we have a citywide map online, like in Code Map or City View?
We don't, but we can obviously make that available to you, but it's an extensive document. Lieutenant Cashin, how large is that?
For the box areas, it's over 9. Yeah.
It's like a telephone book by the time you get done with it, but we'd be more than happy to share
We
it.
just have like one map of the city that shows the boundaries of each of the boxes.
Yes.
And the first number before the hyphen represents.
That would be the actual engine. So in this case, it will be engine 6's area.
And
In
then
this case, would be 14 engine, 30 engine, 45
and then
engine.
what does the second number
It's
represent?
a break. They have multiple boxes. It goes in a cycle from out their firehouse. Isn't that right, John? It's like 14-1 is close to the firehouse, 14-2, and then it cycles around until they get to the extent of their box assignment.
So I see some of these are numbered like 50, 52, 62. There's that many different sub areas in a larger box.
It's broken down into individual little pieces within that box area, that first response area.
So that second number is analogous to like a sector in a police district?
Yeah.
Plus or minus?
My name is John Cashton, Lieutenant from IT. The way the box areas work out is the central box, which is where the physical fire station is located, we'll take engine 6. It will be 6-1. That's their primary box. That's where the firehouse is located. From there, think of like when you get a pizza, it angles out. So 6-10 would be north. 6-11 would be north, a little bit higher. So it does evaluate out. So when you look, doesn't matter which station you go to, if you're going to a 45-10, you're going north of the station. If you're going to a 45-30, you're going east. So essentially, it breaks it out by the compass area. And then the higher the second digit, the further from the firehouse it is.
And there's no like concentric circles or trapezoids or weird shapes, right? So
It's all based off
Can you speak into the mic, just so?
Apologies. It's all based off the street center line, and
so each engine has its own area, and there's only theoretically in this map there's only one engine per like this table is covered by an engine. There's no other engine that covers it. There may be a backup, but it's, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then the last, Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yep, please.
Thank you. You have on slides 14 and 15, I think I'm getting a little ahead of you all, but you have the top 5 neighborhoods. What's the top 5 and what compared to the previous?
These are in EMS responses, but we'll get there in just one second. I'm going to go a little deeper in that.
Yeah, go ahead. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Carry on.
Thank you. I wasn't a real fan of this slides. I was going to do away with them because we have much better slides further down. Okay. But some of the people within the department thought it was important to demonstrate. This is essentially the breakdown of the neighborhoods in the city, which is nice. These are still those top 5 areas, mainly southwest as well as northeast. But then what we did with those neighborhoods is we actually drove them down into the individual neighborhoods by number of call. And I like the idea where they actually heated them up. And you can see those main 5 boxes areas still stand out as the highest concentration of what we have. Low acuity calls is one they always want to talk about, and that kind of dovetails off of one of the conversations earlier in terms of what do you really need to send to a response. Low acuity, you really don't need to send a lot. Alpha Bravo, or the lowest type of thing, you got a cut, a small, fracture, abrasion. Omega is even lower than that. That could be like just somebody's acting off or something like that. Those are the lowest acuity, and there's the ones you really want to target. If you're going to target anything with a lot of these different innovative programs, it's going to be your low acuity calls. That map didn't come through for some reason. Slide 17 for some reason didn't show through. It's a nice heat map. It actually shows it. It just shows that the breakdown didn't come through. I don't know if you have it on your slides in front of you.
No, we don't.
No.
Okay, I'll have to share it.
Okay.
That should have came through, a nice one for you. But I'll go ahead and make sure you get that at the end of this.
Thank you.
And then, of course, we have our high acuity neighborhoods. Our high acuity neighborhoods are going to go and mimic those same 5 that we talked about earlier, which is essentially central, southwest area and the northeast of Baltimore. The top 5 neighborhoods, we actually broke it down in 2 different. Am I coming through loud enough? Because I speak pretty loud.
Yep, you sound good.
Oh. Is it too loud if I talk into the mic?
No, you're fine.
Okay. The top 10 neighborhoods is downtown is number 1. And the question always comes about, what exactly is downtown? There's actually a neighborhood called downtown. It's bordered by President Street, Green, and Packle on the west side. South is Lombard, and Franklin is the north end. And the question is, why is there so many? Think about all the daytime population that comes into Baltimore. They're going to flood those high rises and such, and that accounts for a lot of that. But the top 10 neighborhoods, of course, are downtown at 4th. I got the wrong thing going here. Yeah, the top 10 neighborhoods are going to be downtown for. Oh, he broke them down 2 different ways for me here. I apologize. My notes don't match the slide. For Q1, downtown did 903 calls, and they're actually down. We're actually down across the board right now. In Q4, they did 1,200 calls in that quarter. To just give you a perspective, in FY21, that's what he gave me the big number. I was like, these numbers are huge. 4,822 calls were accounted for in downtown Baltimore, the downtown neighborhood. Frankfurt is the next group. Frankfurt, which is in northeast, it had 754 calls in the first quarter of 2022. The fourth quarter, they did 904. Sandtown Winchester. Sandtown Winchester had 636 calls in the first quarter of 2022, while they had 915 in the fourth quarter of 2021. Sandtown Winchester, on the fiscal year prior, actually accounted for over 3,500 calls, so it's pretty significant coming out of the neighborhood. The next one up is Bel Air Edison. For that quarter, they had 602 EMS incidents in the quarter. The quarter before, they had 788. In FY21, Bel Air Edison actually had 2,932 incidents for the year. Upton for first quarter of 2022 had 544 EMS incidents. For the fourth quarter of 2021, they had 766. Upton for the prior year had a total of 3,194 incidents. Brooklyn is the next neighborhood that's up for Q1 of 2022. Brooklyn had 450 EMS incidents in first quarter of 2022. For the fourth quarter of 2021, they actually had 655. Cherry Hill. Cherry Hill, for quarter one of 2022, had 369 EMS incidents. For the fourth quarter of 2021, they had 530. Mondawmin had 346 EMS responses in quarter one of 2022. They're down from quarter four, which had 406. Central Park Heights had 324 for the first quarter of 2022. And they're down to, from 410 the prior quarter. And then the last neighborhood is Coldstream Homestead, which is Montebello. They were down to 322 incidents, EMS incidents in 2022's first quarter. They were at a high on quarter four of 423. What we also did was broke the neighborhoods down. I know you were talking about how busy the system was, and I know I shared this in an earlier presentation with the City Council and this group about how busy we are per capita per 1,000, or in this case, we broke down per 100 of a neighborhood. The downtown neighborhood actually accounts for 20.3 calls per 100 of the population in that area, of the responses in that area. If you remember when I did the big, when the Eagles, the medical director group, did a study of Baltimore, per 1,000 of the population, we're the highest in the country, with 313 responses per 1,000 of our population in Baltimore. That's why we're such a taxed and busy system. We need to start making directions and moves to put people in the right areas. But you can see from this breakdown, we just broke it down per 100 residents, just to give you a breakdown. So out of every resident, every 100 residents in downtown, they're getting 20 responses. So it's pretty significant. Was that a break place?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're going to open the floor to questions. I have a couple, actually. Knowing that around Q4 into Q1 is when we saw the COVID spike, do we have any sense of what impact COVID had on our emergency response?
On our first response?
During this time period.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a ripple effect. First of all, people don't want to call 911 because they're afraid of the COVID experience.
Yep.
The negative part of that we learned from the first go round with COVID, people were not going to the hospital when they should have gone to the hospital. They have the increased incidence of cardiac arrest at home. Tours are where we would terminate. People were found that they're dead. We worked at their house, unfortunately, and they didn't survive. The back end problem of that we did have with that is we had a huge problem with being able to get people out of the hospitals. We had companies standing by extensive periods of time. The system doesn't have a mechanism. We'll kind of talk about it a little bit later, but we need to target some of those low acuity calls on the front end to be able to go with, should you really be going to the hospital right now? You know, and then on the back end, we got to use some different strategies and approaches to be able to get our people out of the hospital easier and faster. For a long time during the second wave, I had to watch out because I didn't get any Christmas cards at any of the hospitals because I really laid hard on the hospitals about them getting us out of there. Quite honestly, there's a law called EMTALA that basically when we arrive at the hospital, they have to really do a service and get us out of there. We're not trying to be unreasonable and just walk in, drop, and leave. But some of the wait times we had in excess of 2 to 4 hours at some occasions. And that's where we have to take a firmer stance with some of our partners. When I first introduced that to them, I had a lot of pushback from the area administrators. And then finally they realized I wasn't playing and we were going from there. We're actually finalizing a contingency MOP that all these things we're learning, Dr. Lawner will be the first one to tell you, we may go back into another one of these COVID things. What do we learn? We learned we have to prioritize or triage our calls better. We got to put different things in place. If companies are stuck at the stuck at patients' houses, we can't get them out of there. Maybe the company needs to take them to the hospital. We need to do directed triage. We need to. The worst case scenario and the most nuclear option I had, we have over 500 stretchers that run about a foot off the ground. They're portable. They're almost like beach chairs, the old lounge chairs that fold up. The option was to put them on a couple units and at a certain threshold. Patient's going to go, and I'm sorry, Chairman Conway, that's your patient. We got to go. We got to answer the call to the city of Baltimore. So I think that had a lot to do with it. The numbers are down. COVID as a whole has reduced EMS numbers all over the country, just for the reasons that I outlined now.
Sure.
I want to add one thing. Before we got to the point where we said we're just going to get to the point where we're leaving the patients, we met with them and we've talked with them, and they've been working hard because they are partners of ours. So it is a process, and we are working with them, but there are certain times when we have to kind of make stands, and we've given Chief Matz and the battalion chiefs the latitude to make some of those decisions.
Do we meet regularly with the hospitals?
Yes.
Okay.
Tomorrow, actually. Tomorrow morning, I'll have the collaboration meeting. And we sit down there and we talk about best practices. They'll complain about this aspect or this, and we'll say, look, we need help on this area. Most of the time, it's collaborative. But to be honest, as much stress as our system was feeling, the hospitals are in the same stress. You know, hospitals are losing people in influx. I know I told you earlier, Hopkins were having a problem with ICU nurses leaving. They were offering ICU nurses $150 an hour to come out and work for a contract.
Yeah.
So they can't maintain that. EMS systems all over the country have people retiring when they can retire. You know, like you're talking about losing people. Why work as hard as we're working here when we can go somewhere and make more money and do less work? So it's a lot of influx with that.
Yeah. The other question I had, and I don't know if we get into this later, looking at the types of calls we're getting in, but do we have a sense of the types of actions that we should be focused on, or partners that we should be working with to reduce the number of calls? Are there things that we should be pushing from the health department side of things, or working with the community to do population health type stuff, or?
We have, I'm going to cover some of that later, and some of that stuff we're going to be talking about later. We actively partner with the health department. I meet with them at least monthly, if not bi-weekly. That's where some of the conversations came about doing some community paramedicine around the opiate response and peer response. We meet with them regularly. Some of the other options that we're looking at in community partners, you know, the commercial surge units we brought on, we're in a process of bringing them on again because I have a feeling we're getting ready to go into another wave. It's going to help to decant the system. Some of the things that the Councilwoman Porter was talking about our personnel, we got to lower the stress level on the system. You know, some of these initiatives that we're working on, like on the 911, it might only shave off 10,000 runs, but 10,000 runs gives you a break. Yep. You know, and another couple thousand here and a couple thousand here. All those add up, and it'll start to take the pressure down on the system, where people feel like they're I'm going to cover it later, but I'll tell you about how hard they're worked. UHU, unit hour utilization, is a big number, and that gives you an idea how hard we're worked. And we're double what it should be. So,
Thank
yes.
you. Councilman Costello, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of wish I went to nursing school. It's been brought to my attention.
I think a couple of us should, right?
I guess it's not too late, right?
I'm thinking about that as well.
Yeah, that's a doctor.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Okay.
You mentioned in downtown, it was 21 calls per 100 residents?
Mm-hmm. No, 20.3 is the number.
20. But then you said citywide, we averaged 300 and something?
13 per 1,000.
13, I thought you said.
No, 313 per one. It's 313, right, Ben? Right. 313 per 1,000 of the population of Baltimore, of residents of
But
Baltimore.
downtown's the highest neighborhood?
Downtown is just in this particular quarter and this particular time. I would venture to say if I look deeper, it probably is going to be downtown because of the influx of people that come in every day during the day.
Because if downtown's the highest, then per 1,000, they should be at 203 per 1,000. That's why I was asking, how is the city average 313 if downtown's
313 based on, Ben, you did that off of the medical directors.
So this is per 100.
That's per 100, the other one's per 1,000.
No, I understand, but prorated 200 and, do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand exactly what you're saying.
Thank you.
Everything's done in a space and time. So what he's quoting is basic numbers, I think, a year ago-ish. That's a quarter. So it's and if you look at fourth quarter was 27. So it's
we're good. I got it. I understand. Okay. Thank you, Chief. That's perfect. So, so back to the difference between slides, the first 10 that you showed, and those are number of incidents in quarter one calendar.
Quarter one individual neighborhoods.
For calendar 22, but then you have the top 5 neighborhoods. What are those next 5 slides? The top 5 neighborhoods for what?
Top 10 neighborhoods with the highest incidence of EMS in the first quarter.
Wait, all right. So you got 10 slides at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Those 10 slides do not have Upton and do not have downtown on them, right? And those first 10 slides represent EMS incidents in calendar quarter one for calendar year 22, right? So so January 1st through March 31st. That's what those 10 slides
They
represent.
narrowed it down to the individual neighborhood with the highest incidence and box assignments for EMS
Right,
calls.
those are the top 10 in the city. But then on slides 14 and 15, you have the top 5 neighborhoods in the city, and you've identified downtown and Upton.
Because the box alarms overlap neighborhoods, when they do it by just district neighborhoods, that's where the difference came in, correct? Yeah.
So you're doing, so
The boxes overlap in different neighborhoods, and that's where the drift.
so the first 10 is the boxes
individual boxes.
with sub box. Okay, and then slide 15 is not
Individual
top.
neighborhoods.
Right, is neighborhood, not boxes, not sub. Okay, got it. All right, I'm good. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Councilwoman Ramos?
Thank you. A bit closer here. I had a question about, obviously, Coldstream Homestead Montebello is in my district, but the map is not really showing Coldstream Homestead Montebello. It's like more Bel Air Edison. So, and one of the other maps shows you're covering basically Clifton Park, but not the neighborhood. Is that just a graphic problem, or is the boundary?
I think the confusion is between the individual boxes and the
No,
individual neighborhoods.
I'm looking at slide 15. And I know that this is the CSA's, this is Community Statistical Area Map, okay? So it's not exactly, it's a grouping of neighborhoods. But the red splotch there by the Bel Air Edison, by the, I don't know what quarter that is, that's actually the park, Clifton
Right.
Park. So I'm wondering, like, where, and then when you look at the other maps here that are more specific, it's still, the red is not in Coldstream Homestead Montebello. So I'm kind of just wondering, like, where are the boundaries coming from, and what, if it was I mean, I believe that the numbers are high in Chum, no question. I'm not questioning that.
Okay.
I'm just saying that it doesn't look like the boundaries that you're putting in the map is Coldstream Homestead Montebello, because it's not.
Okay, I appreciate what you're saying. That were the two slides I said I was thinking about taking out because I didn't like them because they weren't
All right.
that driven into it. I think what I'll probably do in the future is probably just put the neighborhood broke down without the red, and then break down and show going forward, because that's one of the ones I wasn't really happy with on there.
And so you think that that was maybe just like a mistake?
That was the
'cause-
top 5 from the prior fiscal year is what happened when they blocked those out.
Because it doesn't look like Coldstream Homestead Montebello is actually on any of these maps. It's not even in the boxes. I have nothing in the boxes that is in Chum.
Yeah, the crossover, and we're gonna have to clear this up for next time going forward, is there's box assignment, there's box areas, and there's neighborhoods. Multiple boxes overlap into
No, I
multiple
understand.
neighborhoods.
I'm
And
just
that's
saying-
where the crossover is, so.
Yeah, no, but I understand. We deal with this when we're dealing with precincts versus police districts. Like, I got that. But what I'm saying is that the map doesn't reflect, at least in my district, the
Okay.
list. And so maybe that's a graphics issue. Again, I'm not doubting your numbers. I do know that EMS calls are high in my district.
Okay.
But just wanted to, understand that a little bit. Do you talk later on about the types of calls?
Yes, we do.
Okay,
We
then
talk
I'll
about
wait.
the top 5 on both ends, the highest, the worst, and the lowest acuity that we do.
Break it down by neighborhoods that are here, so in
I
Coldstream.
mean, we
Homestead-
can if you want to going forward, that's an easy
I'm
one.
curious because it would be interesting to know what kind of calls you're getting, because if they're elders,
Mm-hmm.
which in my district, that's probably what's happening, then we can actually see, is there a way to prevent what's happening with the elder, right? If it's a call because someone got shot, that's
Mm-hmm.
another piece of data, right? So if there's a way that we can get this broken down, these top 10,
Mm-hmm.
then broken down by type, that would be super.
Primarily, our most severe calls are really run the chest pain, shortness of breath area. Even though we have a lot of trauma, it still runs higher with the medical side. And you are going to see a higher incidence in those older neighborhoods. I know for a long time, Northwest Baltimore had the highest concentration
Well,
of
so
cardiac
then that
issues.
leads me to my second question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. My second question is about the fact that when someone calls 911 and says, hey, something hurts or something, and it's my understanding that sometimes the dispatcher actually does a leading question, does your chest hurt? Yes. Automatic call to, and I think Chief Ford and others have talked about this actually, right? Where is there some other questions that every medical is super important. I don't want to disparage that. I think it's very important. But if we can be a little bit more accurate about what exactly is happening, and I think you've talked about this before, then we would know. Because my elder, who your statistic has chest pain, may have had a fall, or she may have had a headache or whatever, and it just sparks more, you know what I mean? So try to get more information to the dispatcher, to the EMS, to discover what's going on.
I'm going to let Dr. Lohner take that one.
I think you talked a little bit about this before.
Thank you so much. This gives me a lot of heartburn, which would not be qualified as a severe call under our current scheme. Let me tell you, you've hit on some of the most difficult things, and as an emergency physician, this gives me great pains. The last cardiac arrest I ran in a downtown area was for an elderly gentleman that called for weakness, and so we did not ask any leading questions. I coded that patient for about 30 minutes in their living room. And the challenge is that, if we could figure out the granularity before somebody calls 911, that would be perfect. But remember, we have patients that are biased, patients that are typically with more healthcare literacy, don't want to call 911 and don't ask the question. Then you have more calls coming in. Remember, we've said before, we've got probably about 1,000 calls that are coming in per day, and we use the same standard priority dispatch, which I would argue as an emergency physician is never intended to do this, but it's the best that we have based upon trying to solve a population health emergency.
Right.
So there are always going to be misses, and right now, as long as you have people, and with all due respect, they do a fantastic job. The 911 specialist is tasked with that very thing. They have 25 hours of medical background. They have to ask the same questions so that we can have a standard of practice that is uniform. Until we are able to get and to figure out how to fix that, meaning to ask medically informed questions, which, and this relates to the whole issue of, well, where are we going? Until we have that in place, it's going to be very difficult. And I'm not suggesting at all that it's a cost of doing business. It's just, unfortunately, when we look retrospectively, there are so many variables to integrate, which is why we focus on those high priority questions, which are chest pain, shortness of breath, altered mental status, bleeding, and then stroke. And if you don't have those, we can talk about it a little bit more, meaning we can divert it to somebody with some degree of medical expertise. That will get better, but I think your question really relates to some of the intrinsic limitations of the 911 system. So I would agree, and it's a challenge we continue to look.
You're working on it, right? So
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so going back to this issue of breaking the data down, that would be super helpful for me too, because we are about to do an initiative in my district where we're actually knocking on I knock on my elder's door all the time, with also the fact that we have Gilchrist in my district now, and they do last 3 years of life as well as other medical, at-home care. So it would be awesome to have some of that data to know if that's, actually there's a confidentiality HIPAA issue probably, but now that I think about it.
And I'll let.
Yeah, it's because then we've got some confidentiality issues. You may not be able to share that granular data, but at least sort of a general understanding of the, of what's happening, yeah.
I think this also relates to education, because this is where the status of 911 doesn't move in pace with medicine. I know as an emergency physician, for example, 40% of my patients, specifically elderly and women, never report chest pain.
Right,
So
well,
we're not.
there's
So
that.
if the protocols that actually
Yeah.
dispatch 911 are nationwide and ask the questions in a different way, we also have to worry about what's the clinical context. So there's a lot of an educational piece that goes on, and I totally appreciate the difficulty and the opportunity to speak to that. So that will get better with some medically informed dispatch, and hopefully we'll have some more detail on that as we continue the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Porter, any questions?
I was just going to say, I was going to talk about.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Carry on.
Thank you. So we're going to just go over the call volume, and we have a nice graphic too to go along with that. The second half of the presentation really is getting more into performance metrics. We promised we were going to work towards, so I was going to talk about that. They often say, what is our average incidence and call volume per day? Daily, we average for quarter one, we average 387 incidents per day. Weekly, We averaged for this quarter 2,736, and then monthly about 10,300. You can notice all three are down from the prior quarter. Peak call volume, time of day is between 12 and 6 o'clock at night. Day of the week is Thursday this quarter. Usually it's Mondays. For some reason, Mondays are terrible. Time of day is beginning of the month, and then month of the quarter is January is always the worst. So this is really interesting, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit later. We have a program called First Watch, and we can actually make some of our programs do some interesting things. What this is the incidents in this quarter by hour a day and day a week, and it kind of gives you a visual of how busy the system is. You can see basically from 7 o'clock in the morning right through midnight is where we're busy. The busiest is right about the middle of the day, about between 2 and 4 o'clock. That goes up and down based on quarter of the year. Obviously, summer's a little bit busier, but it's a nice infographic to kind of give you an idea of what calls came in at those hours, at those days of the week in that quarter. Somebody from City Staff might like something like that. I'm thinking.
I just mumbled to myself, very cool.
We're going to have some more coming, so. All right, top 5 calls that we wanted to talk about. This is going to be our most frequent advanced life support type call that we had in this quarter. The first, like I said, most of our, I missed overdose when I went through it earlier with you. Difficulty speaking, shortness of breath is our number one at 2,142 EMS incidents in this quarter. Next is overdose unconscious, 743. And I got to be honest, I've said this before to the city council, most calls don't come in as an overdose. They come in as unknown, man down, woman down, sick, something to that effect. So to get them actually like that is, I don't know if they recoded that. Chest pain with difficulty speaking is the next one at 468 incidents. Overdose changing color is the next one, and that's 451. And then finally, breathing problems not alert. That covers a variety of different illnesses and different underlying medical problems, everything from asthma to congestive heart failure. The most frequent BLS calls in this last quarter, most of them are going to be a 26 call. 26 is basically sick. That's a huge accounting. That accounts for most of our alpha and bravo, our low acuity responses. That's the neighborhood we want to really target. These are the kind of calls that Dr. Lawner was talking about. If we can see these, we want to farm these off and let somebody dig a little deeper. Do I really need to send a whole bunch of apparatus there? Can they sit and wait? If there's a chest pain or a shortness of breath there, and this is the kind of things we're starting to dive down in. Anyhow, the top 5 are 26 alpha 10, which is 1,073, which is essentially unwell or ill. The next one is 26 Charlie 02, sick abdominal breathing, 1,017. Oh, that's abnormal, I'm sorry. 26 Delta 1, sick non-alert, 771. 26 Charlie 1 is going to be sick, and that's at 698 incidents. And last, there's vehicle accidents, which we have a lot of those in the city. Which is 29 Bravo 1, and that's 661 incidents. I'm sorry, 667 incidents, just down from 894 the quarter before. Unit response time. During this quarter, our total average response time for EMS was 10 minutes, 30 seconds. Medic average was 10 minutes, 28 seconds, and AMBOs were a little bit longer at 10 minutes and 40 seconds. Fire suppression response to EMS calls. Suppression response to EMS calls was 6 minutes and 46 seconds, which is a little bit slower than the quarter before. That's what Chief Ford was explaining earlier. We're all an EMS system. If we can't get an ambulance or an EMT or paramedic there, we'll send over a fire truck, and that's why you see the shorter time. Average wait time for EMS arrival, that's how long they have to wait until an EMS unit gets there. That average is 14 minutes and 8 seconds. Quarter 4, it was higher at 15:46 because things are starting to trend back down now. Post COVID dropping back and getting a little bit at a better system, status of the system. Ems Fleet Utilization, I talked about a little bit earlier. UHU, or unit hour utilization, that's a measure of how much a unit runs per hour. So what they do is they express that in a percentage or a decimal. An ideal, a really good system is going to run at 0.25 or 0.3. We averaged 58% or 0.58 last quarter. We're down from 61 or 0.61 where we were the quarter before that. Medics average a UHU of 61.61. and Ambo's average 51%. That's some of the problem we need to decamp with using some of these innovative programs, take some of the stress off the system. Give people a chance to go to the bathroom, get them a chance to get ready, finish a report, go to the next response. Tell me when I have a stop point. Go. Average offload time. This is doing much better than it was last quarter. Last quarter is when I was really kind of stomping and screaming about how much problem we were having at the peak of COVID. The average in the fire department now is at 46 minutes, which is about where we average, normally at 45, 46 minutes to get people off the door. I think that's a fair time to ask a hospital for us to get in where they're busy and offload. When you start getting in excess of an hour and a half, 2 hours, that's where we got to really start working with the hospital or make a move. Regionally, the average over the last week was 47 minutes, which is pretty close to us. The offloads that were greater than 60 minutes were actually at 5.4%. The quarter before, it was actually right about 9, almost 10%. So it's really half the amount of time we're held up. And then the worst turnaround times, historically, over the last week, were at 56 minutes, 90th percentile, and 59 minutes. I usually don't put the units there, but it's historically our outlying hospitals that we share with other systems. Did you want to stop, or did you want to go into metrics?
Go ahead, 2 more.
2 more? Okay. So performance metrics, I know you talked about them. I know you love your data, whoever was talking data earlier. Data is sexy, data sells, data is the way I get grants. Data is the way we can show innovation, we can show moving the needle. All the stuff we're talking about earlier, if we don't have data to back up what we're doing, we have to be a data-driven system. Some of the metrics that we looked at, and after talking with the chief of the department as well as Dr. Lawner, we're looking at some community-based metrics. How are we doing with the community? Operational metrics, which is some of the stuff I kind of went over here, UHU, response time stuff. Clinical metrics, that's the stuff Dr. Lawner looks at. Are we doing a good job, or are we doing terrible jobs of performing medicine and patient outcomes? And then kind of the behavioral health metrics, and to be fair, we've done a lot of work in the behavioral health metrics arena, and what I was going to share is our goal the next quarter is to have these 4 metrics in a dashboard like we do for 911 behavioral diversion. It's a nice snapshot. It's a way that a manager or a physician can take a quick look and say, how are we doing? Are we doing a good job? Like in the behavioral diversion dashboard that I have up here through the 31st, there was 49 people they diverted that never hit EMS and never hit police, and it saved the grant, 15,000 minutes, right? 15,000 minutes of response time by doing that diversion. We're trying to go to that same outlook for our community-based needs, operational metrics, clinical metrics as well.
Yeah, I think we stop there. Awesome, thank you. I have a couple of questions as we went through that. So you mentioned earlier when we were talking about the most frequent calls for service for life support about
For basic or advanced, which one?
This is on slide 24. You mentioned about recoding calls. Do we recode calls, or do we have any sense of saying, after we've actually taken a patient to a hospital, do we have any indication of what actually was wrong with that patient afterward, and do we take that into consideration?
That's a lot of things that Dr. Lawner and them do with. I'll give you an example. When they started this behavioral diversion, they targeted one particular call type. There's a lot of different little variables that can affect what you're doing, and that's some of the things that we're looking at. Ben, if you want to tell them.
Sure. So the short answer is no, unfortunately. CRISP is the Chesapeake Regional Information Database that looks at area hospitals in Delaware. That requires quite a sophisticated import with 3-letter acronyms that probably Lieutenant Cashin would be best served to talk about. The challenge is to write those interfaces and to get the privileges is very difficult. I had to get my own login, as a matter of fact, for the city so that I could actually find out what happens to patients. So when we codify this in terms of very specific queries, we're able to do that. And I do hope that in the future, CRISP will be able to tell us a little bit more. And this is a great segue, because if you look at the 911 behavioral health diversion dashboard, this is a great example of, and Councilwoman Ramos mentioned this, we need the data, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, we need to be transparent. So I can come up here, have a laptop, and look at it in real time. So if you have any questions, we change the metrics, we figure out where we need to move the needle, and we figure out where we're falling down on reporting. The lack of input of CRISP in the interface with our electronic medical record is a weakness not just shared with the fire department, but it's in jurisdictions across the way. I'll call your attention to, for example, in North Carolina, they were able to create a statewide database where they were able to interface this. We are working on it, and I am very optimistic that in targeted initiatives such as this one, we'll be able to paint that 360 picture. But right now, and this is the challenge, if you were to ask me, yes, it's a low acuity call, but a fall in an elderly patient on anticoagulants is a criteria for transport to a trauma center, right? So to me, I get very anxious, and perhaps I need to start medicine for that. But when I get anxious when we talk about, or low acuity calls. We're not talking about not sending resources. We're trying to send the correct resources, and those decisions are predicated upon the presence of accurate information. So it will take time to input CRISP. The behavioral health dashboard, when we talk about the next slide, I'll just spend a couple of minutes on fleshing out that data, because that's an example of what I think is a success. I know that's probably a little bit more information than you wanted to know, but we're working on the import of CRISP.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful to know. I think anything we can do to better inform how to improve the front end means a lot to us. If we can take the information that you guys are dealing with, better improve that information so that the health department can re-strategize, or for car crashes, DOT can re-strategize and figure out where they should be focused. That's kind of happening, but if we can go a little bit further, I think it just makes our efforts that much more precise.
Absolutely.
One of the other questions I had was with regard to response time. We said that our average was 10 minutes, 30 seconds. Do we keep track of, because that's an average, and we all know how averages work. They cut off the ends. It doesn't tell you the extremes. You said there are instances where folks are sometimes there for 4 or 6 hours. Do we know how
hospital
often
offload? Chairman?
Yes, offload times. Excuse me. No. That's part of my question too. That's another question I haven't gotten to yet. This is actually about response times.
Okay.
Do we know how often the response time here was quoted at 10 minutes, 30 seconds? Do we know how often it takes us much longer than that? I know, of course, we had a young man lose his life on a football field a long time ago because we weren't able to get there, I think, over an hour or something like that. How often does that happen? Do we keep track of any information like that?
We do. It doesn't happen very often, but we can obviously bring those outliers to you and let you know those. There are times when we were at the peak of the pandemic, we had extended standby times for suppression companies, just because there's only so many units on the street that we can get out at a time. Right. But there are outliers. We can report on that if need be, and whatever you decide that range is, Chief.
And Councilman, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
2 things. I need to probably get you the accurate information on the time in response to that call. I'll get you that information because it wasn't exactly what was spoken about. So I'll be glad to get you that information. And there are general standards in order to make sure that you can figure out what those outliers are. That's the reason why sometimes they don't do averages, they do percentiles. So maybe we can hold a conversation about that as well.
That would be helpful. I have a couple other questions, but I'll actually turn it over to folks in the committee if there are additional questions.
Yeah, I do.
Councilman Glover?
Yeah, so I'm going back to slide number 25. I'm sorry. Slide number 25, because me, myself, I have asthma, and like 26C01, I just wanted to know exactly, like, when there's a low volume of calls coming in, exactly how do you determine, well, actually, do the 911 operators, are they like trained to triage like the situation?
They're not. Like Dr. Lawner had said earlier, I believe the class is about 24 hours for EMD, right?
It's about 24, 25.
24, 25. They're not going to learn a lifetime of medicine like Dr. Lawner has in those little bit of time. And they're taught to follow a set question and answer. It's different screens on a computer. Unfortunately, like Councilwoman Ramos had said earlier, or maybe it was Councilwoman Porter, but it was about the questions can be leading sometimes in EMD. Like one of the first questions out of the gate is, are they short of breath? Well, somebody got hurt, cut, broke a bone. They're going to breathe pretty fast. And they'll say yes, and right away that changes the dynamic of a call. So a lot of times it has to do with that. When they come over to fire communications can't reclassify a call. It has to take a medical professional to reclassify a call. That's why it's imperative that you have a nurse in the UCC, a trained paramedic. They can say, wait a minute, slow down, this isn't that, or this is pretty bad, we got the fall with the blood thinners. you know, you got to be able to make some professional decisions in it.
Okay, understood. And then the slide number 30, I see where you have here the behavioral health metrics and things of the nature. Do you guys have like a clinician like dealing with mental health like that comes out on the scene to help those loved ones? I'm thinking about the situation we had a little while ago, Chief Ford, over in my district where, you know, you guys came out, but family members came and they needed someone to kind of assist them. They were still going through mental health challenges that entire night. I'm saying, do you guys have anything lined up in that nature where we can assist those family members?
So like I explained earlier, the population health arena is huge. It's kind of you can write your direction, whatever you want to go. Some of the directions that they keep going in right now is where you tie a CHW, community health worker, with a community paramedic. That can be an opioid model. That could be a behavioral health model. We have to figure out what's the right with that, because whatever I do first is always wrong. So we got to figure out it's truth. You got to figure out what's the right, and then try it, reevaluate it, and then tweak where you made mistakes and make it better. But that's obviously an option. Are we actively doing that now?
Do you have like partnerships where you can reach out to and respond to a call? You know, they respond to a call and just say, hey, we need your services at XYZ address. Can you provide those services for us?
So thank you for the question. This is we do have a couple of teams in place. BCRI is the city entity that manages behavioral health response, and our police officers that are actually trained have access to that number. So what happens now if there is an escalation and somebody needs to be, let's say, de-escalated in a way that is evidence-based and trauma-informed, the mobile crisis teams can deploy. That is a resource that is coming out of BCRI. I believe at the height of this particular initiative, we at one point in time had 8 available. And this is a great question. We could probably spend many more hours on it in terms of how we actually deploy this model. Do we embed social workers? We're working with PG County and also on a national learning committee to look at the best way to do this. As of right now, 2022, the request would be made to BCRI, and then they would deploy, if appropriate, a mobile crisis team to that location.
When you say you're reaching out to PG County, do they have something similar to that?
PG County is actually, you heard it here first, they're copying us actually. So we are on it's funny, we have the privilege of working with them because of the consent decree, we were kind of thrust into this, I think, in a way that was rapid and very appropriate. We probably should have been doing this as EMS for quite some time. PG County is using our lessons learned to inform their dispatch project, and we are now working actively with them to figure out where we can collaboratively deploy and cooperate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Burnett.
Yes. So back to slide, what slide is this? I'm looking at it. The one that's ordered EMS unit response times. I don't see, I have it up on my slide 26. Okay.
This?
Yeah.
This one?
And I guess the following one, fire response. But essentially, the question I had is there a prioritization of types of calls? And I'll flag, we had an incident, for example. There was a shooting in my district that occurred, and the gentleman indicated it took 30 minutes for help to arrive. He ended up being put in the back of his girlfriend's car and driven to an ambulance, to the nearest hospital. And then, in that instance, he made it okay, but obviously that may not necessarily be the case. So when those types of calls come in for particularly violent crimes, is there a prioritization and response, or I guess you could walk us through how something like that could occur and what's being done to prevent something like that from happening?
Councilman Burnett, at this time, every call gets a response, and that's one of what you're discussing right now is one of the things that we're working through right now, and there are going to be some side effects to everything, and this one certainly will have some of those side effects, but that is part of what we're working on right now.
Could you elaborate a little bit? That doesn't really help me understand.
Sure. So the problem is that everybody gets a call, they expect to have an AMBO come and get them right away. What's going to happen when we start telling them, I'm sorry, Chairman, you're going to have to wait because you only have a hurt leg, but when you wait an hour, it's going to have an influx. We're going to have increased complaints and stuff. That's why the chief was explaining earlier. It's going to take some public education out here. Right time to use 211, 311, 911. problem is the city for too long has just been you call, we haul. And that's what puts us in the hole. They come, and as they come through, they're feeding the calls right out. Most of the time, we can, we have a shooting here, but when the system's taxed at those high points, it's really difficult to do that. And in the contingency plan, we would actually implement where we would try to hold low acuity calls for the higher acuity.
So as a follow-up to that, then, if and I would flag that this incident occurred near the county line. Is there a time where a call as severe as I've been shot, and you are near Baltimore County? Could we flag or reach out to the Baltimore County EMS to say, hey, this guy's right near
We actively use mutual aid. They might not have had somebody available at that time too, but we actively use mutual aid from Anne Arundel, Baltimore County, Howard.
And Councilman, I'm going to piggyback out. Yes, we normally do it, and what happens is we're not the only ones taxed right now. Everybody is. So, and we get caught in their system if we need their help, just like they get caught in ours if they call for us.
I guess it would be helpful, because I know we've talked about this before, and I don't expect you to have this in front of you, but could we get data on mutual aid response, both how many times we're helping?
Both ways.
Both ways. I think that'd be helpful. Particularly, a number of us represent sort of the outlier parts of the city. The other thing would be helpful for us is as well, because I know it does impact response time, and I know this is beyond the fire department's control, but in these outlier areas, sometimes there are delays because when you call, it directs you to the county, and then you need to be redirected back into the city. I've had that experience myself, but also I know that constituents of mine in those city county neighborhoods have also levied this. Maybe it impacts response time, maybe it doesn't. I don't know if you have like an off the cuff response. Is that something that my constituents are concerned about, that that delay could impact response time or on your end? Obviously, I'm well versed that this is like a Verizon, Comcast, communications company problem, not Baltimore City's problem. But either way, I guess, could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, Councilman, I was going to point that out. The challenge that we have is now people don't use landlines to call 911. When you use landlines to call 911 because you have enhanced 911, it tells people where you're calling from, gives the actual address. Now when you call from a cell phone, if you're not able to give an address, it pings off a tower. If you're sitting close to the city lines, it could very well go to the county and then have to be diverted back to the city. That's where part of the challenge. That's going to be a continuous issue. I mean, I think that's going to be a reasonably ongoing issue. The most important thing is going back to what you said a little bit earlier. If you look at the fastest report, one of the things that it gave us several kudos, one of which is the relationship we have with neighboring jurisdictions and the mutual aid system we have. I'd argue that in the jurisdiction south of us, there's not a reasonable reciprocity. We use them a whole lot more than they use us.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilwoman Ramos?
I had a question about, and I think I've asked this before, I need to know how many people who answer the 911 calls speak Spanish and how you handle people who are speaking other languages. I actually think the map is also an undercount in some of the areas where we have more Latinos living because they may not call because they don't know that it's available to them. We already are seeing that they're not calling 311 because they don't know or they don't think that anybody's going to answer. So I want to make sure that we're starting to hire, and I've said this to the city administrator before as well, that we have to hire more Spanish speakers, more Latinos at front line so that, those services are also available to us.
Yes, ma'am. 911 falls under us. I'll make sure I'll reach out to Director Reddick and we'll check into that information.
And then when you're recruiting, because I also saw in the previous slides that the Hispanic recruits and people who are actually in leadership are down as well. So I want to make sure that when we're recruiting, that we're also putting that, for 911 and also for our EMS, that we're targeting people who speak Spanish, because if you go to somebody's house and they speak Spanish or another language and you don't know how to answer, what's going on, they're playing charades. Does this hurt? Does this hurt? Does it like? So I want to make sure that we're making sure that our first responders are reflective of our communities. So I'll appreciate. So that's a formal request.
Can you repeat that one more time, please?
Sure. I want to know the number of people who speak Spanish and are Latino in the 911 dispatch, not dispatch, but that answer the phone.
Got it. All right, we will formally note that. Thank you. Any other questions before I move on? I want to follow up on my question about the response times. I know it's a difficult question to answer at the moment, but what is the national standard?
The NFPA standard, they use the 9-minute response time. Is this in the NFPA standard?
And then the question that I accidentally started to ask, but will ask now, is about the offload time. And do we know how often we have that longer offload time,
Yes.
an hour plus?
We track that daily. It comes through in the metrics. I can report it out. It goes like this, to be honest.
Okay.
The 3 worst offending hospitals are the outlying hospitals that we have. Some of them just don't get better. Some of them don't come to the table. We try to really work closely with some of our hospitals to try to improve that. Most of the time we have positive interaction and goodwill there. The outliers that we share with Baltimore County, Howard, and Anne Arundel are the problem.
Oh, can you talk into the mic, please?
Sorry. The hospitals that we share with our outlying jurisdictions would be Baltimore County, Anne Arundel, and Howard. They're where we have our most problem, because we're all vying for the same resources, and that's where those problems and those bottlenecks tend to occur. The MDO, our medical duty officer, that is the air traffic controller, they tend to lessen that, but it still occurs on occasion.
Okay, that's helpful. And then also, as far as the national standard, is there a national standard for offload time?
There is none, isn't there? There is no national.
Okay.
Oh, I'm. Yeah.
So these are the national standard is not at all developed. These things come from EMTALA, and the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act stipulates that there needs to be a reasonable amount of time. So there is a interpretation that is done in our jurisdiction. MIM sets what's called a reasonable offload time of around 20-something minutes. It's very important to be specific about metrics. That metric is from arrival to transfer of care, which is a variable we have sometimes difficulty reporting, because that depends upon people to hit the button. We have set in our jurisdiction a threshold, and fractally we can report this with all sorts of heat maps and everything else, which looks really good. We try to set a 40-minute threshold across the jurisdiction, which accounts for the medic unit being able to offload their patient, complete whatever documentation they need, and that's the metric with which we benchmark the area hospitals.
Do we know for other folks in the region, DC, Montgomery County, otherwise, what they're looking at for at hospital times? I imagine we're not the only
actively
person.
meet and talk. It's funny, Dr. Lerner was talking about PG County when I walked in here. My equivalent in PG County was calling me, and we actively speak and we talk. PG had a lot of problems. When we had the last peak that went through in January, they were 2 to 4 average on average.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a real problem. Baltimore County is a little more aggressive with it, but we were all experiencing the same problems. And the same thing is the hospitals we were having issues with, they were also having problems with. We'll have different techniques of addressing it. With us, we go at a 30-minute, 60-minute, 90-minute threshold, where the EMS officer goes out, they're contacted, then the chief goes out, and then we have to not be nice and do what we do. Usually if a chief shows up, they're going to move, because sooner or later we're going to move a patient, so that helps. So,
Yeah, I know we're not going to solve this problem here today. This has been around forever, as long as I've known. I forgot my question. I'll come back to it. Well, we can, if you'd like, if there are key points in the following slides that you'd like to touch on, I'd rather not go through the entire thing, but if there are key points in the following slides that you'd like to touch on, you're welcome to do so.
do you want me to go through the slide, the next couple slides?
If there are key points you want to touch on.
Yeah, what Dr. Lerner and myself were going to do was just quickly go through the metrics and the reasons that they're important. A lot of the questions that the city council had asked are covered in a lot of these community metrics. We're looking at most common call types, neighborhood with the highest type of 911 responses, like Councilwoman Ramos asked for, number of hours when EMS system is in critical condition, because I think that's really important to know where we're at, and number of responses related to overdoses. Again, that's really hard to quantify. We actually, when we research that particular item, we look for people that are given Narcan or naloxone and that react to that. That's a way you can tell, because it only works on an opioid. So, operational metrics, we covered quite a bit. We're talking about EMS response time to sensitive calls, average medic standby time. UHU we covered earlier. But we're trying to put all that together on one big dashboard to look at it together. Total number of EMS responses. The thing cut off my thing here. The slide got cut off. I'm trying to read. Total number of EMS responses and transports, but we always report that out. Then the other end of the operational metrics that we wanted to talk about was the ambulance offload delay, like you talked about, Chairman. Directed triage. How many people are we diverting right to the waiting room instead of taking to the back pathway? Alternative destination transports. How many people are we successful in getting to go to an urgent care center, stabilization center, total health care, or something to that effect? And then TTL, that's kind of where we're kind of using like a telephone triage, where we're trying to work. The problem with it right now, you either go or you don't. We're trying to add additional ways where you can go, but guess what? You're going to go by Uber or Lyft, or you're going to go after you got screened by a community paramedic or a physician on telemed. So that was the operational metrics that we looked at. The other thing I wanted to point out on a lot of these all come from different sources. The biggest challenge with a dashboard is to take all those sources together. CAD does this thing. The EMS reports come from this direction. First Watch is another system. MIMS reports a third. We're trying to pull them all together in a nice dashboard. Clinical metrics, Dr. Lohner, I'm going to pass off to you.
I'll be brief. This is where I think there are, at the end of the day, it's about making sure that our system meets the needs of patients. These are also nationally sort of based metrics where you can benchmark against other jurisdictions. I think in the future there is on the table perhaps where Medicare and Medicaid may pay for play, meaning that if you don't meet the metrics, there will be a proportion of your reimbursement that will be slighted. So when we talk about these are clinically important metrics that our fire department is benchmarked against a couple of other ones. So very briefly, what I'll call to your attention there is these are lines that look at compliance with different metrics. So one is, do we get a blood glucose measurement for stroke? Hypoglycemia, or low blood sugar, is a mimic of a lot of strokes, and I'm happy to say that we meet that metric about 90% of the time. We also document a stroke score. There's also a couple of other stroke scores. These are what we call dynamic metrics, so they're part of what I would like to be here reporting, meaning that you can check a dashboard, we can have access to First Watch, and you can look at them evolve. So the stroke metrics are actually quite good. They come from different sources, as Chief Matz mentioned, and depending upon what you'd like to focus on, we can highlight all of them for you. I don't want to bore you with the details. Cardiac arrest is something that is also very important, and this is where, as a jurisdiction, I think there are a lot of challenges, both due to healthcare literacy and access. So what we'll see over here is that we do document the initial rhythm, which is your one on the upper left, and also things like, are we doing effective ventilation? So if we are ventilating somebody effectively, we actually can show what's called end-tidal carbon dioxide, and this is really important because we don't want to put an endotracheal tube in the wrong place, and we want to make sure we're providing adequate care, which the evidence base for cardiac arrest would be ventilation. And also the question is one thing that our system does very well is that if you manage to get bystander CPR, if you manage to survive, if you manage to resuscitate you, what happens next? And what happens is you get a 12 lead, we transport patients to what's called a resuscitation center, which is a hospital that has a cath lab ready. So if you're having a heart attack, you can go there. And those metrics are consistently about the 90 to 100% percentile. And that's, I think, a testament to our members in the field and also the training. I'd like to say it's their medical director, but those are also well-publicized. Those are also well-publicized standards. This is where we absolutely need some assistance. So when you look at this is basically our response times benchmarked against CAD. And I share your frustration, Mr. Chairman. The issue about response times really has to be looked at in the essence of the call. So there are National Fire Protection Administration standards, but if you have a response time of 30 minutes for somebody with a sore foot, that's very different than if you have a response time of 8 minutes for somebody whose heart is stopped. And that's where we have to have a very nuanced discussion. Now, Baltimore City, and actually there's dispatch metrics in there as well, so you can see that we do a fairly good job once the call comes in. We process the call within 1 to 2 minutes. The challenge is that with our apparatus, and with the demand and with the acuity of calls that we have, there is a significant portion, and this is just within the last quarter, the response times exceed the national standard, which is about, you want to be roughly about 8, I mean, ideally you'd like to be there yesterday, but this is where you want to be about 80% of the time you want to be within 8 minutes. And unfortunately, you can see our graph is, it takes sometimes a while to get there. That's also due to what's called vertical response time. So if you have a cardiac arrest in a building, the first responders are not the fire department, the first responders are your coworkers. It takes a while to get into a building, even at the University of Maryland affiliates. So we can always move the needle, and I think, in terms of the good news and the metrics that are reliably reported, I think the fire department has a good handle on where we can improve cardiac arrest. And you had asked also, well, what do we do with these metrics? And I think what I do with this as a physician and as a public health professional is we say, you know what, we've got to increase awareness. We've got to engage our community. We've got to work with the mayor's, I'm going to get that acronym wrong, MONSE, the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, to provide education about how they are the first responders and how bystander CPR is so critically important, because there is no fire department in the world, with the exception of, all due respect, maybe Seattle, where the bystander CPR rates are like 75%. There's no fire department in the world that has response times of like 2 minutes to cardiac arrest. So we need to own that as a community, and that's where the fire department can leverage existing resources. CARES database also shows what we've already known. If you look at our neighbors, I want to call your attention to basically the bystander intervention rate. And this is where I think we have a little bit of ways to go. So CARES is a database that is reported nationally. It's owned by the CDC and Emory University. And if you look at Baltimore City, we have roughly anywhere between a 16 to 20% bystander intervention rate. And what that covers is that if I drop dead because I'm rather stressed out at reporting the worst statistics, what is the chance that somebody is going to put a defibrillator on me and do CPR? And those rates are very low. They're lower than the national average, and they're lower than, I'll give you another example of knots here. In Howard County, it is about 40 to 60% depending upon the quarter. And you can imagine with our homeless population, with our patient population where substance use is involved, we do have a lot of difficulty where we've gotten people to give naloxone, but we haven't gotten people to do compressions. So that is a great example of where we are, how we can move the needle, and what we can target. We are kind of similar, you'll see, to PG and others in terms of overall survival, and that's been impacted by COVID and a couple of other things. We went over the behavioral health metrics. I would be happy to, that's a whole section of itself. That is another dashboard-friendly initiative where we have been able to not only save time, but also connect the appropriate resource to the call. You know, a lot of people say, for example, you know, we don't see it as a success because we've only diverted, if you look at when it was incepted in June, we've only diverted, let's say, 130 people completely away from the 911 system out of a larger body of eligible calls that's 1,200. But what that has done is we've avoided police response, we've connected people to mobile crisis teams, and we've also engaged our behavioral health experts where they were never engaged previously. Where when you called 911, you said, you know, I'm really nervous, I'm having a behavioral health crisis, you got the police, you got a first response fire apparatus, and you also had a EMS unit respond. And that is not the case now in Baltimore City, and we continue to improve that. That was highlighted on the behavioral health metric that was shown earlier. So I will, that is all the clinical metrics that I have. I would just close by saying we will have the flexibility to report these out in a graphical way. So if there's a particular area of interest in terms of the high priority calls, such as STEMI, stroke, cardiac arrest, those are the ones we particularly focus on, and we'd be happy to delve into more or less detail at the council's discretion. Thanks.
Thank you. I have
STEMI, for the record, STEMI is chest pain, heart attack. ST elevation, MI, myocardial infarction. It's a heart attack. I just Googled that. He does doctor stuff. He'll talk too high sometimes. Good, I'm sorry.
I thank you guys. I have to say I always enjoy being able to go through the data and talk strategically about how we're looking at approaching it going forward. One of the other questions that I had as we were going through some of the health metrics was it made me think a little bit about our fire program, how we do house checks and provide smoke alarms to folks. When we're thinking about getting bystanders trained and involved, do we have a program like that? Are we exploring something like that? Thinking about 1, naloxone, 2, CPR, 3, making sure that people have first aid kits for basic stuff so that they don't have to call for an ambulance. Are those things we're looking into?
We already have a hands-only CPR. In fact, all those things we already have in place. COVID significantly hurt us in that process because there weren't any community events. We weren't going out in the same way. But all that's winding back up just as we were at Councilman Burnett's recruitment where we're recruiting people, and also Be More Healthy where we taught hands-only CPR to a whole lot of individuals. In fact, we had someone there that was Spanish speaking as well, Councilwoman, but deliberately. But we do have all those things in place, and we're winding it back up. And actually, that area we're gonna incorporate with our public information office to make sure it's significantly stretched out more. That we basically use it as a force modifier and use more resources in order to try to encourage that, because that has been something that Dr. Ben has brought to me continuously.
Yeah.
I'd also say that this is also not just the fire department. I think we've published on this actually in Baltimore City. We published on it also with Howard County. It's a very of all the interventions. I mean, I'd love to have an ambulance in every corner, but the most cost-effective intervention for CPR or for cardiac arrest is CPR, and this is where we can engage city partners. So right now, you don't need a physician to actually train you in CPR. Actually, the YouTube videos is one of the things that we use. So we're talking about a minute and a half of a hands-only video. We already have partnership with schools, I believe, in the health department. We look forward to expanding those in the post-COVID era.
Just to dovetail on what Chief Ford said, at the Be More Healthy event, they trained 237 people in one day. So that just gives you a kind of scale where we can outreach with that. Problem is COVID put the brakes on a lot of stuff with that.
It'd be really interesting to see, once we do get that back up and running, what numbers we're hitting, and I think even more making sure that it's informed by the data. We've got excellent data telling us the types of services that we need. It's probably different by neighborhood, maybe not all that different, but determining where we want to prioritize, and then whether it's naloxone or CPR or first aid kits, I don't know. Using the data to figure those things out, I think would be smart. So, any other questions? Councilman Burnett.
Yeah, I did. So on the slide 42, I guess the outcome data that you shared, there we go. I think it would be helpful, at least to if you had this information and I think you offered it for other types of incidents. I'd be interested in addition to what you laid out, I think it would be helpful for us to know the like violent crimes as well, Part 1 crimes, assaults, that kind of thing. I think would be useful for us.
About trauma? You want trauma? Is that what you're trying to?
Trauma calls would be helpful data, I think, for us to look at.
And car crashes.
Vehicle crash. Yes, there we go. Yeah, but I guess would that still be
MVA
trauma? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that'd be useful. And the other request I would have is you provided pretty good neighborhood-based data, which I thought was helpful as far as where the calls are coming from. I would be interested to know response time overlays, like how quickly are we getting to certain parts of the city. So by neighborhood would be useful.
I'm sorry, can I ask some clarity on that question?
Sure.
Are you speaking specifically an ambulance transport unit, or are you speaking in general of EMS being on the patient side, being on the person's side?
I guess what would be most helpful, I guess I would just want to know how quickly are we getting on the scene.
First arriving, okay.
Yeah, first arrival.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilman Porter.
Thank you. Quick question. So I'm very familiar with the bystander intervention rates. I wasn't connecting the dots for Baltimore City, so because of the nature that we have here in Baltimore City, have you all just kind of researched any type of non-traditional models to the automatic external fibrillator program? I know like that's a program that has kind of not gotten the best kind of play. since its inception, and I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to, you know, if CPR is kind of our main kind of source for issues that we are seeing in the city, is there an opportunity for us to kind of overlay with like convenience stores, beauty salons, so that like specific places in the community, there are non-traditional ways for people to kind of get to those devices that will help save someone's life? Similar to what they do in the schools, but just kind of thinking through it from a community perspective.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on the name of that program. What's the program that goes to your telephone that tells you where the next closest available aid? Pulse Point.
Pulse Point, yeah.
That's what it was. I couldn't think of it. I was trying to Google it while I was standing here. We looked at it. The question is, it's an education issue.
Yes.
Two, it's an issue of cost. Can we get the AEDs out where they need to be?
Yes.
You know, and availability, because the first thing is really effective community CPR. Next is rapid defibrillation, and then the third is to get us there to do our thing. So, yeah, we are looking at it, Dr. Lawner.
We also published on barriers to bystander CPR as well, and we found out that unfortunately a lot of these are irrationally based fears out of liability and contagion, which is really difficult. And we actually did that study here and compared it with Howard County. The challenge, I think Chief Ford said, is that this is something where we need to, and I totally agree with you, I don't profess to know the best means of delivery, but the study also showed that once you engage people, the barrier to perform CPR, at least the perceived barrier, went way down. So I think there is something to be said for awareness, and I think we lost a lot of momentum after COVID. I mean, I remember at the War Memorial Auditorium, we had 100 people there, and so we also, quite frankly, the police were pulled off of all the, which was a very hot topic, were pulled off of all the responses, and there's about 300 of those sometimes. So we need to figure out, how do we get the resources needed? And that may be a mobile AED, right? Yes. That may be working with MIMS to explore grants. I think there are a lot of ways to look at that, and the fire department is, I think, just one small piece of that overall puzzle. I agree.
No, you're exactly right, and I would just add that when we're talking about building rapport in the community, the reason why I say your convenience stores, your beauty salons, your barber shops, those are the places where people build the most rapport.
Yes, ma'am.
And so it's an opportunity. I mean, we've had those similar public health challenges in substance abuse, mental health, and you know, to credit to University of Maryland Medical System and the barbershop and beautician program,
the medical school.
that's
sure.
an opportunity where we are seeing major success with the intersection between public health issues and response to public health issues from a community perspective. And I've lost my train of thought. Crap. But yes, but you understand what I'm saying, that intersection, that they've had major success with that program. So I mean, if there's an opportunity to mirror that program and replicate it within some of the ways that you all are expanding the fire department, particularly the community health worker and peer support model, I think that would be a great opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing no further questions, we are going to we're going to go into recess. I appreciate you guys for all the work you guys do, and this is incredibly helpful. I think as we think about these issues, hopefully some of the things we're talking about we can get follow-up on and make sure we continue to move the ball. But thank you guys so much for the work you guys put into this.
Thank you.